the Zoom live. Okay, great. Good morning. I'm Ward 1 Council Member Brianne Nadeau, the Chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and I'm calling to order this performance oversight hearing on the Department of Public Works. The time is 9:35 a.m. We are reconvening today to hear from our DPW government witness. On February 11th, we heard from over 24 public witnesses at DPW's performance agency hearing while the agency was hard at work preparing for a snow event. I have a few focused priorities for today, including discussion of the agency's various pilot programs and the long-term implementation of those that have been successful and popular, ensuring clear agency communication and proactive responsiveness to residents, establishing a roadmap to implement new laws passed by the council last year, and addressing overlaps or gaps in service between DPW and other agencies. I'm going to keep my remarks brief today so we can proceed straight to the agency testimony, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. If at any time we are joined by another member, I will recognize them for remarks and questions. We will now hear from Anthony Crispino, Deputy Director, along with Christine Davis, General Counsel, Jessica Smith, Chief Administrative Officer, and maybe later, Perry. Maybe later, Perry Fitzpatrick, Agency Fiscal Officer. I am going to administer an oath to you all before you begin your testimony. If you could please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may begin your testimony.
Okay, good morning. I'm going to do a little bit different. I've submitted my written testimony, but as opposed to just reading it back into the record, I'm going to hit the highlights and then we can go right into the questions that you have for us. So good morning, Chairperson Nadeau and other members that may be joining us for the Committee on Public Works and Operations. As you pointed out, I'm Anthony Crispino. I am the Department of Public Works Deputy Director, and today I will be providing the agency's testimony on behalf of Director Timothy Spriggs. You've also pointed out I am joined by our General Counsel, Christine Davis, and our Chief Administrative Officer, Jessica Smith. Our leadership team is here together to represent DPW employees who are responsible for our accomplishments in the past year. As an initial matter, I would like to thank Mayor Bowser for providing resources needed to perform our duties with excellence and dispatch. I also want to thank City Administrator Kevin Donahue for his steadfast support throughout fiscal years 24 and into 25. For their support, we are grateful. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank outgoing Director Timothy Spriggs for his steadfast leadership, his guidance, and the vision that he has provided to the agency during his tenure. His friendship, mentorship, and guidance will be sorely missed. But he's moving on to another chapter, and we wish him all the best. Madam Chair, thank you for creating a true partnership with the agency that benefits all of the district residents who receive our environmentally sustainable municipal services that are both ecologically sound and cost effective. And finally, I want to recognize our primary customer base, the district residents and businesses that we serve. You truly are our partners in the ongoing growth of the greatest city in the world. Next slide, please. Thank you. As this slide depicts, we have been productive since our last performing oversight hearing. We have been delivering multiple services as critical responders, supporting national special security events and life and death emergencies that occur throughout the district. We've begun new programs to expand food waste collections and corridor beautification throughout the district. We began new public art through our award-winning Murals DC program. We've supported crime prevention through the Nightlife Task Force that operates in the district. We've supported national and local special events such as the Cherry Blossom Festival and the Rock and Roll Running Series. And then finally, we've also engaged in seasonal operations, including snow and ice removal, leaf collection, graffiti and poster removal, residential street sweeping, and parking enforcement to ensure clean streets. Our workforce is on the streets and in the alleys, so weather has been the biggest influence on how, where, and when we are able to work throughout the year. And in that regard, I want to highlight how weather recently enlarged our already full plate of services. Snow. Well, we haven't had snow in a couple of years, at least not to the extent that we did this year. As everybody in the district is aware, on January 6th and 11th of 2025, we received 6.6 inches and 1.3 inches of snow amidst the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter and the 60th presidential inauguration, both of which are very large, multifaceted events. Again, our children enjoyed 2 snow days, mine a little bit more. But this year, we really stretched our resources to get the job over 7 12-hour shifts to ensure that the streets were clear. Temperature, it really does matter. Between January 4th and the 12th, we sustained temperatures that we normally don't see in the district or the national capital region. The temperatures fell as low as 9.3 degrees below normal, and sustained freezing temperatures kept the district snow team on duty for 84 consecutive hours to make our streets safe. These snow events and the 2 consecutive national special security events brought positive national and international attention to the district and our snow removal effort. We planned for the January 6th counting and certification of electoral votes at the U.S. Capitol, which is a newly established NSSE. But the next day, we faced the unanticipated January 7th and 9th NSSSE. That's a lot of consonants and vowels. With President Carter lying in state at the U.S. Capitol and then his funeral services at the National Cathedral. And then by the 20th, the temperatures were so low that the inauguration of then President-elect Donald Trump was conducted indoors at the U.S. Capitol. DPW was a full partner with the federal, district, and state local agencies that planned and supported that event. I'd like to point out that MSNBC and CNN noted how our streets look great considering the amount of snow that had fallen. In particular, the United States Secret Service expressed its appreciation for the contributions that were provided by the district agencies directly to Director Spriggs. Without our support, the Carter family would not have been able to honor the wishes of the president. At the end of January, DPW had the sad duty to support the Metropolitan Police Department and the DC Fire Department's recovery effort along the Potomac River following the midair crash that took place. In that regard, we provided portable light towers at 2 different staging areas, one along the banks of the Potomac at JBAB and the second at the temporary mortuary site. Moving to our FY24 initiatives. They are listed, and we'll start with the high dollar scofflaws. Last April, using DPW personnel and funding, we rolled out our high dollar scofflaw pilot, getting vehicles with thousands of dollars in outstanding fines off of the streets. Our license plate reader data identified where to find the vehicles. Between April and December of 2024, we impounded 424 high dollar scofflaw vehicles and recouped $588,983 from these vehicles. In addition, to increase our storage capacity, we opened a 3rd impound lot in July on Reed Street. Unified communications. We have been hard at work streamlining how our customers can reach us and be assured of timely, accurate responses. In FY24, we created the Unified Communications Center, which is an internal unit where we respond to questions, concerns, and requests for services and information. Responsiveness, accuracy, and timeliness are our guideposts. The management team ensures responses and service requests are addressed timely and properly closed out. It's not always perfect, but we're working on it and aiming to be an effective in managing and resolving service requests and reducing confusion amongst our stakeholders. Composting. This is a success, a very large success. The popularity of the food waste composting has grown from our initial drop-off network of farmers markets and now includes 9,000 households in our new curbside composting pilot. In its first year, I am happy to report that we collected 1,423 tons, which equates to 2.8 million pounds of food waste and garnered a 98% participation satisfaction rate. I want to stress that those are 2.8 million pounds that are removed from the waste stream and not being sent to Lorton for waste to energy services. We received $3 million in fiscal year 25 in the form of enhancement funding to provide services for 9,000 households for another year. So the pilot will continue in its current form. To maintain the service level, we will add a small number of new participants as current participants move away or opt out of the program. Priority will be given to residents living in designated low-income and disadvantaged communities across the district, but mainly concentrated in wards 5, 7, and 8. Later this month, we will continue installing 30 smart public composting bins. I believe that we have already installed a few of them and they are in service. These bins will be available district-wide, so every household can compost its food waste 24 hours a day, not just those households that we service with normal trash and recycling services. We will carefully monitor usership and diversion performance to assess expansion opportunities as the fiscal year continues. The industrial shredder, this is near and dear to my heart. In the last fiscal year, we addressed fire prevention and cost reduction at the Fort Totten Transfer Station by acquiring a Pronar MRW 2.1010 industrial shredder. This machinery is very useful in that since we began using it last October, we have reduced by 50% our non-combustible tonnage sent to Covanta, which lowered our hauling and disposal costs. As we continue to use the machine, we expect to see further reduction in cost savings and perhaps expand it into other areas where we might generate revenue. The Throne restrooms, you and I, not restaurants, restrooms, pardon, apologies for that. You and I, yeah, they are that clean. Yeah, you and I can attest. The Throne restrooms. So in the last fiscal year, we installed 4 standalone public restrooms called Thrones. They were installed in June of 2024, and a 5th was added in August. FY25 funds were provided to maintain these public restrooms for this fiscal year, and hopefully they continue to have the success we saw last year. Corridor cleaning. The mayor has been very supportive of us in this effort. Corridor cleaning and highway beautification is an FY25 initiative where we stepped outside of our normal operations to meet a need. In November of 2024, we hired 40 temporary staff dedicated to this program. Between November 25th and January 4th, when the weather hit, the team collected 73 tons of debris and addressed 1,191 graffiti service requests and removed over 200 illegal posters. We will continue this program in the new fiscal year and expect good progress. Corridor cleaning. Okay, I hit corridor cleaning. Sorry. Moving to the swing shift. This addresses overtime in our collections unit. Keeping trash collections on time prompted the agency to pilot a mid-shift or swing shift in FY24. The swing shift of 21 temporary employees works weekdays to complete delayed or understaffed trash and recycling routes. From February through September of 2024, the swing shift reduced overtime in the collections division by approximately 35%, or $1.2 million. I'm happy to report that the swing shift is back in service again, and we expect these savings to continue. All right, moving to Benning Road, the Zero Waste Campus, the timeline and community engagement. Since the fire that closed the facility, we've been hard at work. In 2024, the Department of General Services came on board to help DPW manage the Benning Road Transfer Station construction project. This has proven to be a great help. We just welcomed a contractor to complete the 3rd and final phase of abatement as well as the demolition process. An architect and engineer or A&E solicitation is about to be released. And once the A&E contractor is on board, community engagement can begin. And we are anticipating the site to be completed in late 2028. Alternative fuels. I'd like to reiterate, as in years past, that DPW is a leader amongst fleet operators in investing in alternative fuel vehicles. Of our 1,087 vehicles, more than 54% or 594 vehicles use some type of alternative fuel. This includes 392 vehicles that use biodiesel, 5 vehicles that use clean natural gas, and 197 vehicles that are fully electric or hybrid. In FY24 and FY25 to date, we have taken significant steps to encourage the use of alternative fuels year-round across all vehicle classes. This includes fully electric vehicles in the light-duty class, using biodiesel consistently in our heavy-duty class as well. We operate one of the country's most significant 100% biodiesel programs and have partnered with the Department of Transportation, DGS, and the Department of the Energy and Environment and the Executive Office of the Mayor to strategically plan for electrical infrastructure to expand the electrical vehicle program further. Additionally, DPW's Fleet Management Administration has provided education and training on alternative fuel vehicles to fleet managers across all district government agencies, which raises awareness, sets sustainability goals, and showcases best practices to be followed. And with that, that's the end of our slideshow, and I welcome your questions.
Very good. I've been informed by my colleague here that he got it down to fewer than 90 questions for you, so.
All right.
Um,
Appreciate that.
yeah, it's nice of everybody to pretend like that's not a lot of questions. We've been joined by my at-large colleague, Christina Henderson. Did you want to make an opening? Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that presentation and a lot of really good stuff there, and truly appreciate the work that everyone is doing. And you know, the work of DPW is the bread and butter of the city, and you have to get the basics done, but you're also clearly trying to innovate while you do it. So I appreciate that very much. All right, so we're doing 10-minute rounds. I'll start with a few miscellaneous issues that came up with during our public testimony. Are you familiar with the issues that the residents of Snow's Court in Foggy Bottom have had receiving regular DPW services?
Yes, I have been made aware of that.
Okay. So Snow's Court is residential on an alley, so it gets a little confusing, and they've had issues with both leaf and snow removal. Is there a particular designation that they need to have that would make it easier to get those services regularly?
Yes, as I understand it, based on the layout of the alley, the houses face into the alley.
That's right.
Traditionally, with our snow and leaf programs, the district focuses on streets. I know alleys are technically thoroughfares, but we focus on streets. So we don't collect leaves out of alleys, and we don't plow snow within the alleys. We've noted that a designation change needs to occur.
Okay.
Internally, we can adjust our operations if need be. However, DDOT is the one who controls the designation as to whether or not this is a street or an alley, and really that would be the catalyst for making the systematic changes you're referring to.
Okay, and we can check in with them. Do you happen to know if that's legislative or if they can just do that?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I think initially what would have to happen is DDOT would have to go measure, do a study, which includes like right-of-way width, street construction standards, and apply that through their engineering department, and then they would make a determination.
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of other similarly situated residential alleys?
There may be one or two that have come up. There's one where I believe there was some back and forth over ownership of the alley. Where it went between whether it's district owned or it had been ceded to an HOA. We'll continue to work with DDOT on those to ensure that the services are collected and see if there's alternative ways to address the issue without the designation.
We're seeing more alley development in recent years, and so this is something we probably need to be thinking about what the protocol is as that's happening. So the way I've seen it in Ward 1 is somebody wants to build residential in an alley. They come to the council actually because they need us to designate a street name. It has to have a street name so that it can receive EMS services and mail and all of that. So DDOT's already involved with that. So perhaps we need to add a checkbox to whatever it is they're doing there so that it gets the right designation. Because I know, but I haven't had that complaint from Williams Alley. Have you? Yeah, fair enough. Um, but certainly it can be overcome. And I think about 9.5 Street in Ward 1, which obviously got that street designation, but really does look exactly the same as Snow's Court. So, okay, so that's in Ward 2. So perhaps we can work with Councilmember Pinto on it, if there is a legislative need to do it. But then the broader DDOT alley designation, with the street naming probably should be something we share with Councilmember Allen so we can make sure there's some consistency. Okay. We also received some concerns about inconsistent tree collections after holiday season. Okay, so I know this got delayed because of snow. We're the way that this sort of played out in my inbox was people would call for 311, and I see on your website it says if your tree's been out a week, call 311. We'll make sure we come get it. And that worked, except for the crew that came to get that tree was only getting that tree, even if the whole block had trees out. So how do we work through that?
So I want to just point out the difference between last year and this year. Last year, everything worked according to plan, but
Yeah.
we weren't dealing with the NSSEs, the weather, and the presidential inauguration.
100% understand.
But that aside, when we received word that the crews were following the assigned service request routes and not picking up, we addressed the managers at the street and alley division and said, look, anything between stops, you got to pick up.
See a tree, grab a tree.
Grab a tree.
Yeah.
Might have to put that in service next year.
Do it.
But in response, we have upstaffed it. We have approximately 6 to 9 crews working daily, and we have a hybrid approach now. Not only are we continuing to focus on the 311 service requests and using GIS to create daily task lists for a number of crews, we are also using the leaf zone maps. And every day the crews, those zones are broken down and the crews are assigned a specific sub route or sub area within the zone. And then we go from top to bottom, left to right, and then move to the next zone the next day. So we're gridding out the city as well as handling the service requests. And the stats as of Friday, I believe there were 342 open service requests. We had closed over 2,000 service requests, and we had collected 206.2 tons of Christmas trees.
Right.
And we will continue working until this problem is addressed.
And so is it, thank you. Is it a particular crew that does this and just this, or is it, they pick up other things? How does that work?
When they're assigned to this task, that's what they're solely
Okay.
focused on. This
Okay.
is a full 8-hour shift.
Got it. Okay. So they go out for 8 hours getting trees.
Yes.
Okay. And until what date are we going to be picking up trees?
I believe it's slotted to be March 1st, but I'll roll it into ground maintenance. I'm not going to leave trees on the street. That's not what DPW is going to do.
Would it make sense to do something this week leading up to March 1st, just to make real clear to anyone whose tree has not been picked up exactly what they need to do?
Yes, that would need to be folded into our comms plan.
That would be
communicated
really
to
helpful.
the residents.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. And we can help with that. But I think, yeah, and I'll send you whatever we have. I think I've got one more block in, no, there's some in, near Westminster, I think, that are just sitting out, but we'll get it over to you.
Thank
And, we'll share with the council members if they want to push it out too.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. We don't have these problems in my house. We have a menorah. It just goes back in the box. So, okay. There were a few witnesses that said they've had recurring issues with leaf pickup. Okay, this is what I want to get. I want to actually talk about leaf pickup and bagged yard waste because there was confusion this year that I was surprised about, and I want to make sure it's not me being confused. During leaf season, leaves are supposed to be raked out front. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are there any blocks in the city that are being told they should bag their leaves during leaf season?
No, I believe our communications from the beginning of the program were that leaves should be unbagged and just raked to the front.
One bit of feedback I got was, I think one of the mailers, I didn't go back and look, but I was told said, no need to bag your leaves.
And that's because some people are really adamant about bagging their leaves.
Yeah.
And they worry that we won't pick up their bags. So happy to have any feedback on how we can shift. that, but
Probably
we're trying to say you can't
Do
bag your
not,
leaves,
yeah.
but there's really no need to bag your
But if
leaves.
they bag them, you guys can't just scoop them up. You got to empty them and then,
Correct.
so that's really, and
Yeah.
do crews really do that when they're coming through
That
on
was a
leave?
shift in operations this year that we were saying we wouldn't go back and do just service requests for those, that we would actually do it on the route, have them empty the bags and suck them up. It is
Okay.
an operational inefficiency, but we didn't want to tell people they could not bag their leaves if they really wanted to rake them early and contain them in that way.
But yes, some crews were dumping the leaves out. The bags go in the back of the supervisor's pickup, and then the leaf vacuum is able to suck up the loose debris.
But we're open to feedback on how we can clarify that.
Well,
That was the intent.
If
was
you
trying-
feel it's important to give people that option, I'm not going to tell you not to, but it seems like operationally, oops. Can we turn the beep off, please? It seems like operationally, we should just be telling people they can't do it.
From an operations standpoint, yes, that would make the most sense.
Politically, that's challenging.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
want to make sure we get everybody's leave.
Okay. I'm going to come back to leaf because I want to just go through a bunch of philosophical questions about leaf season. And I'm going to let my colleague ask some questions and then we'll keep going. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm gonna start on, well, first, I'm gonna ditto what you said about the Christmas trees. I was coming down 11th and 13th today, and their trees. I know sometimes it's harder to see because cars are now parked in those areas, but if we're not picking up trees after March 1st, if there's some sort of communication of what you want folks to do this week, then happy to pump that up. Okay, I want to turn to illegal dumping. So during the performance oversight hearing last year, Director Spriggs and I discussed a joint effort that you all will be doing with DDOT and DPW to remove vegetation and tires from around areas between I-395, 295, and 695. I want to get an update in terms of how that's going, the vegetation cleanup part in particular, because I know that's a bit more time consuming than just picking up tires or other debris. And then also after that, let's talk more about the sweep inspectors, but I just want to hear about the update on that.
Sure. So the program continues. We have, as I mentioned in the slide deck, we have 40 employees that are divided up between corridors, highways, and graffiti.
Okay.
As it specifically relates to highways, they are on a schedule where they move down the highways in segments each day. And then they are reporting out what they're doing. They're taking pictures of the progress before and after shots. Based on what I've seen from the reports, it's going well. We did have a lapse in the illegal tire dumping, but based on my personal observations going through the city on a daily basis, that has started back up. So we're going to have to pay some more attention to it.
Okay.
With the vegetation, I am actually happy to report that about maybe a month ago, we took delivery of a new piece of equipment that I think is going to pay big dividends in that regard. It's called a Mower Max. Essentially, it's a large tractor with counterweights, and then it has a 22-foot arm, and on the end of the arm is a 5-foot wide mowing head.
Okay.
And so what it'll be able to do is one operator, we have a truck behind with arrow boards, and it just goes down the highway and it reaches over behind the guardrail and cuts a 5-foot swath, which is what DDOT wants in order to repair the guardrails.
Okay,
And
but we only have one of those?
Yes, at this point, we only have one. I don't, if we have a need, I can always put in another order, but we wanted to start with one, see how much progress we can make.
Okay.
The idea is that with that 5-foot swath, would the litter will be more easily able to be
Mhm.
picked up.
Okay. How many sweep inspectors do we have?
Currently
22.
22.
22. Okay. So, Deputy Director, what you kind of mentioned about the tires, I'm also starting to see the tires more. And I know we had talked about this before, in terms of like, what does investigation look like to find where these are originating, particularly in the areas where we see them most often, in the back sort of Fort DuPont Park around, and some of the common areas where some of your sweep inspectors would normally see some of these things. What does investigation look like to identify who the culprits are?
On a daily basis, it involves the assigned sweep inspector patrolling the ward that they're in and making the observations and noting where we're seeing reoccurring illegal dumping. Once we've identified, and citizens have been emailing the executive staff as well about certain areas, and we make observations. If we see things reoccurring, at that point, we loop in our environmental crimes unit and they place cameras to monitor the area and hopefully identify the perpetrators. If it goes beyond that, we also try to loop in MPD.
Okay. In FY24, did we see an increase or decrease in the amount of illegal dumping cases that sweep inspectors opened?
I believe we saw an increase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know how many total?
Off the top of my head, no, but I can get that data for you.
Okay. I think part of when we're having these conversations, part of it is not just around the work that you guys are doing, but some of it is also we need to put some sunshine on it to let people know, first off, DPW is trying to address these cases. And second of all, like if your cousin is out here dropping things, this is also part of what's making it more difficult for the neighborhood and community altogether. In that regard, I know that illegal dumping is one, but we've also had some very big challenges with small condo associations or owners who haven't set up the appropriate trash or recycling collection for their unit. And the piles of trash that pile up there that then sort of sweep out, and kind of go from that way. We recently did legislation on, I think it's called the Trash Act. Was that what it's called? Trash, clean,
Clean Act.
something.
Yeah.
They like acronyms in this particular committee. Do you feel like you have all the tools that you need? And I know that it may not just be you. It might be a combination between you guys, Department of Buildings, the OAG's office, but that cannot be acceptable, right? It's private property. It is not the responsibility of DPW to pick up that trash. And yet they're allowing residents to just sit in it, essentially.
So from DPW's point of view, we internally, we have what we need to address the abatement part. With our new sweep manager who's sitting behind me, Mr. Thompson, we are becoming much more proactive as opposed to reactive, where we're working with the Department of Buildings to identify troublesome property owners, levying fines and liens if necessary to catch their attention and try and address this. There have been, I believe there was one in particular where we even brought in MPD to assist us in the 3900 block of Minnesota, where the property owner, I sent crews out 3 times over the course of a month to remove tons of debris that was building up because it was becoming
A nuisance issue.
well, not only a nuisance, but a negative draw on the health of the overarching community.
Mhm.
So internally, yes, we have what we need to address it. We will continue forging our relationships with the Department of Buildings, OAG, MPD, any of our external partners to create a multifaceted approach to try and address this for the residents.
Okay. Because I don't want the idea for folks to think, so some of these building owners to feel like, oh, if I don't address it and I let it get bad enough, DPW will just handle it for me. I feel like that is a negative incentive, So I feel like we have to kind of figure out this balance, but I want folks to do their part, especially if you're going to be a building owner. Let me switch to talking a little bit about the high dollar scofflaw pilot. I feel like this is something we had, you know, when you guys were on DDOT and Councilmember Che was chairing that committee, 424 vehicles recouped $588,000. Like,
Correct.
that's a lot
Yes.
of money. Are there any, so out of the 424 vehicles, I imagine that somebody didn't come pick up their car.
Correct.
How many do we still have?
As of December 31st, we still had 230 vehicles on the lot.
Okay. So what's the plan for those cars?
But keep in mind that we have to keep vehicles on our lot for 28 days to give a chance for someone to come and pick them up. So some of those 230 vehicles hadn't hit their 28-day mark yet.
Okay.
And then once they do, we work with our partners at the DMV on a title recovery process so that we can scrap or auction them.
Okay. So my understanding was that these numbers were from April to December.
31st, yeah.
All right. So March 1st is Saturday. So these 230 vehicles on account
Yeah,
basis.
all the 230 are still data from April through December 31st.
Okay,
We
so-
can get you updated information, but those were as of December 31st. We still have the 230 of that 424 on there.
Okay. Councilmember Nadeau, I'm sorry, I'm gonna need another round.
Yeah, do you want it, I mean,
Oh,
you
no,
feel
no.
like you have enough for a second round, or you want?
Yeah, no, I have enough for a
Push
second.
through, okay.
Thank you.
We've also been joined by our Ward 7 colleague, Wendell Felder. Would you like to make an opening statement? Okay, round of questions?
Yes.
All right, that one's yours. There you go. Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Deputy Director, as well as other members of your senior leadership team. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'll jump right in with my questions. It's no secret that Ward 7 has some of the most highest illegal dumping rates across the district, specifically neighborhoods like Southern Avenue, Eastern Avenue, Hunt Place, Minnesota Avenue, just to name a few. What preventative measures are in place to address these longstanding challenges in the short term and in the long term?
So in terms of preventative measures, as I've mentioned, we place cameras to monitor areas where it's known, they're known illegal dumping sites. Once we've identified and abated sites, we work with the Department of Transportation in certain instances. If there's a particular alleyway that we can shorten by dropping cement blocks to keep vehicles from accessing, we'll do that. And also just setting a precedent by going after some of the actors. If we can levy fines, or if we can work with MPD to get prosecutions to send the message that we're not going to tolerate illegal dumping, that's kind of the strategy at this point.
When you say go after the bad actors, how are you doing that? If they dump trash, leave, and residents call in 311 or reach out to my office to make the complaint?
So it is a bit of a cat and mouse game. There are some areas where they only get dumped, it's only dumped once at that site, and it's hard to catch that perpetrator. However, there are areas in Wards 7 and 8 that get repeated instances of illegal dumping, and we are able to place cameras. And I know that in the past, we actually have caught people on camera where their faces are visible, or they're identifying information from their vehicle is visible. And under those circumstances, not only will we pursue civil action, but we will forward it on to MPD, especially in the case of commercial entities. We'll forward it on to MPD for a criminal prosecution.
Say if you go on a community walk, and I've been on walks in which the mayor's team has been out there. They've brought government agencies to the community. Then a neighbor calls 311 and put in a legal dumping request, or a neighbor might call my office and say, "Hey, council member, this couch has been on my block for the last 48 days." How do you prioritize where to dispatch services? And is there a regularly scheduled maintenance schedule uh, uh, to address those concerns?
So, yes, the street and alley division, once we get into ground maintenance season, they are patrolling the alleys, they're maintaining the alleys on a regular interval. At any time during the year, though, if there is something that's illegal dumping or doesn't neatly fit into our traditional services, then we have an escalation team handle that, and that would be governed by the service level agreement timeframes that are established and reviewed each year.
How is that being prioritized though? Like if a resident calls or if you go on a walk and the mayor say, hey, I want this done tomorrow, like how are you prioritizing? What's the sense of urgency compared to what is not the sense of urgency?
So typically when we receive something related to illegal dumping, the first call is to have the sweep inspector go out because that's our enforcement arm. And then based on the amount of debris, the type of debris, I mean, that would escalate the response. But if it's entered into 311, it's based on the 311 system. So it's the time it's entered into 311 and then the SLA that applies to that type of service request is how we would respond. Now, obviously, there are always one-offs. I get emails directly from residents as well, and I've worked with several residents where I've gotten an email, Ward 8 in particular, where one individual reached out to me and brought it to our attention that there was a pile of 70 tires. I had a crew out there within several hours. Unfortunately, there was more that we didn't see. The resident reached back out, and the next day I sent the crew back out again, and I think we removed somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 tires. So it just depends on the severity of the incident.
You mentioned earlier, there's been instances in which you put blocks, cinder blocks through alleys to prevent bad actors from driving through. Uh, is there any other deterrents that you guys use to prevent bad actors from illegal dumping? In addition to that, how effective would you say those measures have been?
Um, I mean, beyond the cameras and working with DDOT to try and limit access to known dumping areas, um, it's really difficult to address some of these bad actors. I mean, they, again, like I said, it's cat and mouse. We address one location and they'll move to another area in the city where someone's not looking just to avoid the cost of dumping the materials and paying the fees. I mean, so efficacy, we're really good at responding. It's a much harder to address it moving forward because again, some of these people are very intent on circumventing the system.
When you talk about inspectors, do your inspectors respond to uh, service requests, or are they actively driving across the ward? And if
Both.
they, okay, um, okay, I have some ideas in terms of how we could deter these bad actors. Can you provide data on the number of illegal dumping complaints received in the past year and the number of cases successfully resolved, particularly in Ward 7?
Yeah, I don't have that data to that specificity in front of me, but I can absolutely provide it to your office.
How many citations and fines were issued for illegal dumping violations in the past year, and what percentage of those fines have been collected?
Bear with me one. If you give me a moment, Mr. Thompson can try and pull up the data for you now so that we don't have to provide it at a later point.
Should I ask my next question?
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
okay. What efforts have DPW made to increase public awareness and community engagement in preventing illegal dumping?
So the sweep inspectors, in addition to the enforcement activities, they also undertake educational activities where they will go out into the community and try and educate people that they come across. They attend town halls hosted by the ANCs or civic associations. I know the Office of Waste Diversion, we put out signs to anti-littering signs. We try and distribute across our website information related to illegal dumping. So we're trying to take a multifaceted approach. We don't want to just be the hammer. We also want to have a carrot involved.
Could you speak to the long-term strategy that DPW has to address illegal dumpings or hot spots? And if so, what are those key components? And I want to keep driving on illegal dumping because I get calls and text messages and emails nonstop in Ward 7 pertaining to this issue.
I share your concern. The nature of the legal dumping that occurs east of the river, unfortunately, is not comparable to what we're getting complaints for west of the river. These are not instances where someone has done remodeling and their contractor dropped, a couple of shingles and some 2x4s. In many instances, unfortunately, what we are removing is significant tonnage of materials that range from construction debris, used tires because someone is trying to circumvent the environmental controls. So long term, what I would like to see is a greater partnership with the Metropolitan Police Department and a renewed effort to prosecute these individuals, especially the commercial haulers, the mom and pops that are doing cash and carry, where they're picking up materials that aren't even generated in the district, drive across the district line and drop it into neighborhoods that don't need to deal with these issues. I really would like to focus on prosecution moving forward.
You mentioned that there's a difference in the number of illegal dumping complaints that neighbors in wards that you see in Ward 7 compared to in other parts of the city. Given that that's the case, how do you go about dispatching inspectors? Is it based on the volume of complaints or services that are needed, or are you going with walk me through that process in terms of like how is your staff distributed to address these challenges, specifically in communities that have the history of illegal dumpings or a lot of debris and trash and et cetera?
So our sweep inspectors are assigned to regular areas that they're in every single day, just to handle the normal issues like, regulating commercial trash or looking at alleyway cleanliness. Now, as it relates to illegal dumping, not only is it the assigned inspector's responsibility to be checking all of the alleyways and streets in their area daily, but the environmental crime unit is district-wide, and they tend to spend the bulk of their time in the areas where the legal dumping is occurring. So they are prioritizing those areas, and they are really the more nuanced mechanism to go after the illegal dumpers.
Okay. Well, I want to be mindful of my colleagues' time, and I know
I do have, and before you, we go to the next round, Robin, there were 2,332 illegal dumping service requests open in Ward 7, but I will have to follow up with you on the number of complaints that are still open and the number of complaints that have been closed, but I can get you that in relatively short order.
I would like that. Hopefully that 2,000 mark isn't still the case based on the calls that we get.
Not open necessarily.
No, not
Yeah,
open. That's
hopefully
the
not.
volume though.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember, you also asked about citywide illegal dumping requests. There were 14,716 I'm sorry.
That's okay. Want to get for the record?
Citywide, there were 14,716 illegal dumping service requests. Sweep reports that they issued 84 tickets in fiscal year 24 and 90 thus far in 25 for illegal dumping.
Thank you. I'll save my next round. I'll save my additional questions for my next round.
I'm gonna delay my return to leaf season to talk a little bit more about this while we're on a roll. So we updated the law last year to create more enforcement authority around illegal dumping. How do you coordinate with the Office of the Attorney General on illegal dumping enforcement? And what procedures do we need to build out more to improve that?
Procedure wise, I don't know. I'm not sure there's anything to build out. The system's in place.
Okay.
And then in terms of how we partner with them, it really, again, it really depends on the nature of the incident we're responding to. Where I envision OAG playing a big role is the repeat offenders, the commercial haulers. I think that's really where the statutes give us the most leverage to initiate a criminal prosecution, and that would also involve bringing in the Metropolitan Police Department so that they could do the requisite paperwork that starts the criminal process.
Okay. That's interesting. So, does DLCP ever get involved?
They do.
Okay. Are they able to revoke a license of a business if they're doing? Yes, I see some nodding in the back. Okay, good.
I believe so,
Yeah,
yes.
okay,
Yes.
great. It's
The
a team
the
effort over
characters
here.
that supported me says
The
yes.
the
Yes.
team effort over here. Okay. And is your partnership with the Department of Buildings on illegal dumping new, or is it just redoubling those efforts?
Redoubling those efforts. We've worked with them on several nuisance properties already this year.
Okay, great. And why is the ratio of sweep citations to the number of service requests so low?
It's difficult to prove who actually did the dumping without video or someone present. Our inspectors go through the material. If there is any identifying material there, they will cite that person, but
Mhm.
oftentimes if it's, just tires, it's difficult to identify who actually dropped the tires without video or someone actually seeing or providing identifying information regarding the vehicle.
So there has to be some sort of personally identifying information or commercially identifiable
Correct.
information. Can you think of some citations that were issued that would give me an example of what that is? Like what you find that allows you to write that citation?
Sometimes it's personal mail.
Mail. Yeah. If it's like a bag of trash.
Ye-
Yeah.
Yes, personal mail, personal items, things with addresses
Yeah.
on it, yes.
Okay. But that of course is sort of the small ball in terms of the illegal dumping.
Correct.
Okay. How many cameras have you deployed to monitor illegal dumping in the last year?
Stan.
Stand by.
We currently have 43 cameras,
Okay.
but the number fluctuates depending on whether or not we've resolved an issue.
Got it. So if an issue is resolved after a camera's installed, you move it somewhere else.
Correct.
And who decides when and where to install?
The sweep inspector and Mr. Thompson will look at the severity of the incident and determine whether or not, and the number of times that spot has been illegally dumped on to determine whether or not it warrants a camera.
Can you use private camera footage?
Yes, if citizens provide, you're talking about like Ring cameras?
Yep.
Yes, sure. We
We've talked a little bit back here about maybe a rebate program for this type of thing, although I don't know that we need to create a new one so much as we could just say, hey, there is a rebate program if you want to install this for illegal dumping in addition to safety. So perhaps that could be something that we work with neighbors on, in places where there's persistent illegal dumping. Public witness mentioned that a vast majority of citations for illegal dumping traceable to one officer in the 5th district. Did you hear that testimony?
I did.
Any idea what's going on there?
It really just depends on the nature well, let me back up. It depends on the sweep inspector. Everybody has different focuses in their daily responsibilities, and it just depends on what they come across in their area. It just may have been that in that particular instance, the number reflects the number of illegal dump sites that they came across.
Mhm. We heard other testimony that streets that dead end into National Park Service facilities have been a particular sore spot with illegal dumping. And your pre-hearing materials indicate that there's no MOU to address that. Any thoughts on how to address those hotspots?
Yes, so there is no standing, you're right, there is no standing MOU at this point, but we have gone to great strides to strengthen our relationship with the National Park Service. Um, uh, I have personally spoken with the regional director of the Park Service, as well as the superintendent of the mall and Rock Creek Park, related to the cleanliness of their areas and where it abuts up to district property. We've made good strides in graffiti. We certainly can talk to them about how we can jointly address these trouble areas where it's right on the fringe of both of our jurisdictions.
And is there any hope that they address it themselves, or is it just a matter of getting permission for us to address it?
I mean, if it's close or on their property, the expectation would be that the National Park Service would maintain federal property. However, because our interest is the well-being of the residents and visitors to the district, we will not let it sit. So it would be at that point asking for permission.
Do you think that roll-off days are an effective diversion tactic for illegal dumping?
I think it depends because a lot of times the people who are doing illegal dumping outside of just household trash next to a public litter can.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about something
Sure,
different
sure.
than that here. I think a roll-off day could be effective for something like that, but when you have bad actors from small businesses or contractors, I think you're not hitting that target audience, with the roll-off days. I'm not gonna say they're not effective for other reasons, but for this particular audience, I'm not sure you're capturing them with the roll-off day.
We did hear some testimony about properties that where the landlord is not doing a good job of managing the trash, and then residents sort of just dump, which seems like it's obviously a multifaceted issue. And I wonder if we did more roll-off events in those areas where we see that regularly, it could be helpful with some of the dumping, which is a little different than what
Yeah.
the
and
bad
we
actor
have-
dumping.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have actually a spring cleaning effort underway that's with our, not only our comms team, but our sweep team and our Office of Waste Diversion. And so you'll be hearing about that soon, just in terms of a citywide initiative, kind of a hybrid off of the roll-off days
Okay.
to try to test some of these theories that we're thinking about. I'm not sure you're gonna get a lot of like the tire type of.
For sure,
but-
for
but
sure.
some of the things that you're addressing, I think.
I mean,
will-
it's a multifaceted
be
issue,
evaded there.
obviously. Yeah. Um, any idea why roll-off days are managed by Office of the Clean City and not DPW?
We actually were talking about that the other day. We're not sure the history behind that
Okay.
personally.
Would it be possible for staff who collect illegal dumping pickup requests to also be empowered to inspect and issue citations?
So the individuals that are picking up the trash or sanitation techs, it's
Got it.
not in their position description.
Yep.
And they are in a different union than the sweep inspectors, so it
Mhm.
would. Oh, I'm sorry, I've been corrected. Same union. We have three, so sometimes.
But it's
they
a
correct-
different training.
But it's a different training.
So for all the efforts you're making to try to get all these positions filled, if you had to add another layer of training, that would probably slow things down.
In addition, if they're gonna write the ticket, then they have to be available for court. So then it takes them away
Uh-huh.
from their sanitation technician duties to make them available for court.
Got it. Makes sense. Are you still engaged in a public service announcement campaign discouraging residential trash being put in public litter cans?
Yes, but that was what I was talking about for the spring
Okay.
cleaning initiative, how we can amplify that further.
How do you assist residents who are using public litter cans for household waste to make sure they have the right number of cans at their household?
So every household that we service gets a super can and a recycling can. If there are issues with those cans, we will work with the residents, especially if they've been damaged by, our personnel in the course of the use and collection. We don't want to just penalize folks if the access to a can is not there.
Are you able to connect the dots though, when there's residential illegal dumping to that sort of situation, or is that just not like even feasible with way the workflow goes.
So in that regard, that's where sweep actually comes in.
Okay.
To figure out what the root cause is. Is it somebody that's in a multi-story building that we don't service, that, like we've been talking about, has
Mhm.
issues with the bill hasn't paid, so the dumpster's full?
Yeah.
It really comes down to sweep figuring it out and letting us know how to approach it.
All right. I'm going to turn back to my at-large colleague, Councilmember Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to go back to the high dollar scofflaw pilot. So overall, we have 3 impound lots still.
Correct.
How many are full?
There's space available on all 3 lots.
There's space available. Okay, this is good. We're making some progress because I believe at one point last year,
They were full, yes.
they were full. Okay, so folks are coming to get their property or not.
If they don't, then we go through the legal process of recouping our costs.
And we've actually tightened that part of the process. So one of the reasons why we have more lot space now is because on day 28, we are working to move that vehicle. There's not much we can do prior to that, right?
Mhm.
But we're moving the vehicles off the lot faster.
Okay, how many end up getting auction versus scrapped?
Yeah.
Or is that a DMV function?
No, that's us. So in the data that we provided between April 2nd and December 31st, and again, we, as Ms. Smith has indicated, we can get you update to date data, but during that time period, 70 vehicles went to scrap and 10 vehicles were auctioned by OCP.
Just keep in mind, that's just for the high dollar scofflaw
scofflaws.
pilot.
Okay,
So those are just the numbers for that total of 424. We send other vehicles to auction that are,
And we
maybe it was
scrap.
abandoned vehicle or, something like that.
okay. Yep, I think it would be helpful to kind of know the overall number. And what is about to be my next question, which is, do you all feel like it is working or is worth it?
It's absolutely worth it. We have had success. Look, just like illegal dumping, this is cat and mouse. The high dollar offenders, they work very hard to avoid my tow cranes. My cranes are out there. We're using the license plate readers. We are looking for these folks. We're utilizing heat maps to try and identify the areas of the district where we should concentrate our resources so it's not scattershot.
Yeah.
And we have had success where we're bringing in vehicles that have $40,000 worth of unpaid fines and violations, down, multi-thousands. And we are starting to get those vehicles and bring them in.
Okay, I had this similar conversation with the DDOT director. And when we get to MPD, we're gonna have that same conversation as well. So DDOT has data where they know where the highest number of folks are coming through on these cameras, where you're seeing the most uptick. They're a really fancy website because they have now all of this data. And I'm like, okay, you all can only catch them if somebody has parked on our streets, right?
Right.
Not in a parking garage, not on a parking pad, not in someone's private residence, on our streets, which is not a high percentage per se, because some of this is just folks who are continuously passing through. But for MPD, I need them to also be posted in these areas that are high volume areas, and they can also sort of find some of these things as well. I do feel like some people are starting to get the message. There are occasions where I get emails from Maryland or Virginia drivers who have ended up in one of our lots, and then they're surprised that they're not allowed to do a payment plan in order to get their vehicle out. And it's like, well, if we have told you and you're at the lot, that means that you've hit a number here. And so, okay, so we have space in the lots. If you could follow up with the number of,
I have it right here.
Oh, okay.
actually. So for fiscal year 24, we impounded 6,043 vehicles. Of that,
I'm sorry, slow down,
43.
6,043.
This is just for fiscal year 24.
Okay,
Of that, 1,976 were scrapped, so like sold for parts.
okay,
And 212 were auctioned. And keep in mind, vehicles have to meet a certain threshold for us to be able to auction them both in condition and age of the vehicle. So
Okay.
there's always going to be less vehicles that are auctioned than scrapped.
Okay, and prior to scrapping or auctioning, we are also verifying that the vehicle has not been reported as stolen.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about OAH, Office of Administrative Hearings. So in FY '24, Office of Administrative Hearings reported that about 11,500 cases came from the Department of Public Works. In Q1 of FY '25, there have already been about 5,200 cases that come from DPW. So you guys are actually one of the top contributors to OAH's backlog of over 29,000 cases. Did you guys know that?
We've always been a contributor to the backlog.
Okay. In terms, well, let me ask a couple of things. One, how many staff do you all have working on these cases with OAH?
What do you mean working on the cases? We have 22 sweep inspectors.
Right, but someone has to appear at OAH. That's what I'm talking about.
Those are our sweep inspectors.
Oh, okay, so
They
your
write the
sweep
ticket.
inspectors are
Yes.
doing both the investigations and then also appearing at OAH.
Correct.
That's correct. In
Oh,
complex matters, they seek the assistance of the Office of General Counsel.
okay. Okay, well, then given okay. Of the cases that you guys have, are the vast majority of them sweep inspector related?
Yes,
Okay, so if I'm now sort of thinking about earlier, you said 14,716 illegal dumping citywide, 84 sweep inspector citations, but if the vast majority of the OAH cases are also their responsibility too, are you concerned about the workload for your sweep inspectors in terms of being out in the field and also having to appear at OAH and track these cases as well?
well, they have the opportunity to manage and balance their workload. They submit the ticket, the hearing isn't the next day. There's got to be time between the issuance of the ticket for the respondent to receive it and to reply to OAH and OAH schedule a hearing. In the interim, they can conduct investigations and continue to develop other cases as time goes on. So they don't have to, and many of the cases now, or some of the hearings are virtual, so they can do them from the field. They don't have to always go to OAH to adjudicate their matters.
Okay, so when does it come to the level of general counsel's office getting involved?
Where there's a respondent that has 34 tickets, or where the respondent is making legal assertions that the inspectors need assistance with.
Okay. All right. Have there been any of the cases for DPW that OAH has found legally deficient?
They do dismiss illegal dumpings often because sometimes the lack of identifying material. We may find one piece of mail and OAH may find that's not sufficient. Or the person for whom receives the ticket says it's not mine. I am the property owner, but I didn't dump the material there. So there is a large percentage of the illegal dumping matters that are disposed of short of a finding of responsibility.
Okay. I think this is helpful for the conversation of illegal dumping overall, right? For folks to understand that it is not just a DPW matter, but if a property owner challenges it and OAH doesn't find strength in the case, then no one is
Correct.
penalized in that
Correct.
situation. Okay. Do you all meet with OAH to understand better what they might need, or I'm not sure I'm appropriately framing this question, but so I chair the health committee.
Mhm.
We have a lot of public benefit cases, matters, et cetera, that come before OAH. And so they've set up a task force to specifically talk to the various agencies around where they're sort of seeing deficiencies or holes in the cases that are being brought. I'm curious if y'all have had that similar case conversation with OAH.
In the past, we had. I don't know if they're still doing the quarterly meetings with the ALJ over our particular matters. But in the past, we were having those meetings to discuss evidentiary issues, volume issues, changes to the citations and manner in which OAH processes our cases.
Okay. Councilmember Nadeau, I have just one more question. I just want to quickly commend the team on the curbside composting. It's not easy to do that, to find these little buckets that are out there. But I did want to ask, you mentioned in your testimony about placing these bins across the city. And I'm curious how you all are going to determine best siting location.
So we went through a full community engagement process in each ward to talk with folks about A and Cs in particular, to talk about placement. We also tried to place them in areas that had a lot of apartment complexes because they wouldn't be participating in our curbside program. And additionally, looked at where they were situated near our farmers market. So trying to spread the wealth. We have 30 of them. I think 17 are out right now and the rest will be out in the coming weeks because we staggered the implementation just to make sure there weren't any bugs in the system. But we'd love to be able to expand. We're closely tracking the data for utilization and weight and hope to be able to justify expanding that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau.
Councilmember Felder?
Thank you, Chairperson. Picking up where I left off on the topic of illegal dumping. What's the average response time for illegal dumping complaints? And how does DPW ensure timely cleanup, specifically around the areas that have been affected?
Well, we abide by the SLA, and I believe it is 13 days is what we have, is the amount of time we have under the SLAs to address the issue. And our goal is always trying to beat the SLA.
Have you given any thought to any event, a site, maybe a reoccurring illegal dumping location, to send inspectors out in advance of getting the service request placed in 311?
Yes, we do encourage the inspectors to be mindful of certain hotspots in their areas and check those frequently.
Do you have an internal map in which the inspector is periodically checking in with the senior leadership across each ward, just basically tracking the sites that they visit that have historically been illegal dumping sites?
I mean, they interact with their line supervisors, but at the executive level, no, we don't have a dashboard for that.
Okay, that might be something that could be helpful. Additionally, are there any plans to expand the use of surveillance cameras in high dumping areas? If so, what's the timeline and budget allocations for the initiative?
I mean, the number of service requests and the need will drive the acquisitions. The cameras themselves are not particularly expensive per unit, and that is something that we would deal with in our appropriated budget. If Mr. Thompson came to any member of the executive team and said that we needed to expand the program, we would certainly do it.
What are the barriers that DPW may be facing pertaining to illegal dumping regulations? And are there any legislative or budgetary support that's needed to improve the enforcement?
No, I don't think there's anything additional that's needed at this time. I think the barrier, as we've kind of alluded to, is being able to identify the perpetrators. And that really comes down to us just really working with our law enforcement partners. Unfortunately, illegal dumping, it happens in the middle of the night. So it's one of those out of sight, out of mind kind of crimes until you're in the impacted area and you have a large amount of debris in your backyard. So it's just doubling down our efforts.
It's obvious that Ward 7 is in greater need of DPW services. What can I do as a Ward 7 council member to better support DPW?
Just, I mean, your office staying in contact with us, and just flagging issues as they come up, pushing to constituents like, hey, if you have information to help DPW or MPD identify these individuals, please bring it forward so that we can stop this. The agency can't do it alone. This is a collaborative effort. And if we work closely together, we should be able to make headway.
Unfortunately, I have a dozen outstanding constituent service requests ranging from illegal dumpings to tires and alleys. If I send them to members of your team, can we work together to ensure that these issues get resolved in a timely manner?
Absolutely. You can send it directly to me, and I will make sure that it's tasked out appropriately.
Thank you.
welcome.
Shifting gears, moving to snow preparedness. I heard in your opening testimony, you touched on that. We know that leaf collection was paused during the snow events. What are you doing to make sure that all streets are taken care of? I have several residents who reached out to me notifying my office, that their leaves still have not been collected.
So you're right. The weather did pose a significant challenge to the leaf program this year. With the amount of snow that we had, the leaves were underneath the snow, and then when the snow melted, the leaves started to decompose. We have been out there until Saturday on the regular schedule, and we are continuing to bring our grounds maintenance folks as we gear up for April 1st when we start grounds maintenance. We also have street sweeping starting on March 1st. So the areas that haven't been touched will continue to monitor with our grounds maintenance operations and our street sweeping operations to get the curb cuts in the areas along the streets that might still have residual leaf matter.
So the current inspectors that are out there and or the you said grounds maintenance,
Correct.
those individuals aren't reporting out areas that may still have that still need leaf collection. Like what is the level of communication that in preparation for March and April, uh the streets that still need their leaves collected, that happen in a timely manner? Or are you just waiting until March and April to?
No, the grounds maintenance folks are there. The formal season for street sweeping starts on March 1st, and that's pursuant to the posted signs. April 1st is the traditional start to our grounds maintenance program, because that's when we start getting into cutting back vegetation as the temperatures come up. In the meantime, though, those employees are out there, and it's the expectation that the supervisors are coordinating with the outgoing leaf supervisors to make sure that if there are spots that still need attention, that grounds maintenance is assuming that work.
Just to clarify though, we extended leaf season. So there are people out right now following the map that was set to pick up leaves. So the leaf season folks are still going at it as we speak, in addition to all the things that the deputy director talked about.
Thank you. I will say I applaud the work of DPW doing our snow events. I think that in Ward 7, you guys did a solid plan. There's always room for improvement, which leads me into my question. Can you provide an overview of DPW's snow removal plan for Ward 7 and how it prioritizes streets for plowing and salting?
Sure. So under the district snow plan, which is governed by the DC Snow Team, which is a collaborative effort between the Department of Public Works and the Department of Transportation. Similar to any of our programs, the city is divided up into certain zones, and the agency has a number of zones that they are responsible for. Within those zones, you can think of the streets as divided up into 3 levels. The national highway system, which would be like your 295, 695, the major thoroughfares. And then you get your red and blues, which are arterial streets that are high volume, and then the residentials. With snow operations, plows don't go down until you get to about 1.5 inches of snow. It's just not effective to try and plow at that point. So leading up to that level of snow, we try to take preventative measures. So with the past couple of storms, 24 to 48 hours out, we apply, if there's no rain, we apply the brine, which is a mixture of beet juice and salt. The beet juice is the white lines that you see down the road, and that allows the salt to stick to the street and not be pushed away by the vehicles. Then as we get closer to the storm and we have a better sense of the forecast, we will then also supplement with applying rock salt. And this year we start in the residentials and then we move to the reds and blues. And at the same time, National Highway is already out there applying salt to the larger thoroughfares. So it's not that there's any preference given to any one area of the city. It's all mapped out and everybody gets the same treatment across the boards.
Hopefully the snow is behind us, but you never know. What are the key challenges DPW faces in meeting snow removal expectations? And how is the agency addressing these challenges should we get snow again?
I mean, look, the NCR is particularly difficult in terms of its forecasts, and that really drives how we apply our operations. The last storm in particular, it started off 5 days out. There were reports that we were going to get 13 inches of snow, and by the time we got to 24 inches or 24 hours out, we were down to trace amounts. But because we need to ensure that DC roads are open so kids can go to school, seniors can get meals, we have to prepare for the worst. So it's standing up a lot of moving pieces and having to balance that when we can scale back to reduce costs without compromising the operations. So, I mean, that really, the forecast is our biggest challenge when it comes to snow.
Speaking of forecast, and this is my last question this
Sure.
round. How does DPW coordinate with WMATA, DDOT, and other emergency services to ensure roads remain accessible during winter weather events?
So the DC Snow Team holds operational calls, and some of our partners are on those. In addition, the district is part of the Council of Government, which is a regional entity, and we participate. DDOT and DPW are on those calls, and during those calls, the heads of transportation and public works each report out their efforts, and if there are any issues that might overlap over jurisdictional boundaries, we try and resolve them ahead of time.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Thank you. We've been joined by our Ward 5 colleague, Councilmember Zachary Parker, who will recognize for a 10-minute round. Did you wish to add an opening statement?
I will skip the opening statement and just jump into questions. It's good to see you all. I'm going to continue with the theme of snow removal. I appreciate the partnership, knowing it's a big lift. I did want to address some of the gaps that we're seeing in Ward 5, namely on like bike trails as well as walkways between the MBT and Rhode Island Avenue. Can you confirm that DPW is fully responsible for treating and clearing the full pedestrian bridge walkway from the bike trail all the way up the ramp and down the ramp on the other side of the metro stop? And so I'm talking about off of Rhode Island Avenue as it relates to the Rhode Island metro stop.
I know exactly what you're talking about. We've had issues the past 2 years with that. So the trail itself, the MBT or MDT, is maintained by DDOT. I believe that walkway is DPW's responsibility. I know that we've had issues about clearing it in the past. The past 2 storms, I've made sure to point out to our bridge team that we need to be out there applying salt to ensure its passability. I know there have been some hiccups with that, but I will keep on top of it to ensure that that we get it done.
And out of the last 3 snowfalls, we definitely did notice a difference in addressing that walkway. So that aligns with what you're saying. The last snowfall, there was no issues. The first one, it took days to get it cleared. And I do appreciate your team being responsive. Can you speak to why the duties are divided between DPW and DDOT for clearing the ramp and the trail?
I don't actually know why the agencies split the jurisdiction over the trail. It's always been DDOT's. They have a dedicated crew that maintains it. In terms of graffiti, illegal dumping, we do provide assistance when they ask for it, but to my knowledge, it's always been their jurisdiction, but I don't know why.
In my mind, it just makes sense that it would all live with DPW. And I know you probably don't want more responsibilities as it relates to snow removal, but it would be easier, certainly from a government relations perspective versus having to talk with different teams and different agencies trying to get one trail or pathway cleared. Is there a comprehensive map or plan, sort of like the snowplow map, that keeps track of all of these type of pedestrian or bike lane infrastructure in the city? And who is in charge of clearing them?
So bridges and pedestrian walkways fall under DPW. The bike lanes currently for snow removal fall under DDOT.
And when there's a, let's say, a call or a complaint, are you all triaging with DDOT to say, we need you out here on this street to clear this lane?
Yeah, yes, we'll always help DDOT. We will triage where necessary.
Okay. So we can follow up about that, and I'm hoping through this committee, we can gain some clarity about the responsibilities between DDOT and DPW. Again, it is my view that I think it should all just live with DPW for the sake of efficiency, but I'm happy to keep moving. Really excited to see the food waste smart bins and the compost pilot. In general, I think this may have already come up somewhat, especially in the fight against rats. I heard from some neighbors in Ward 5, specifically in the Stronghold, Edgewood, Eckington, Bloomingdale communities, that they want the next expansion of the pilot to be a community-wide expansion. What would be needed to adjust the pilot to have the next expansion be universal composting in a small geographic area like a Stronghold community?
Just to clarify, are you talking about the curbside pickup or the new bins that we just placed?
The bins that you
Okay,
placed,
the
yeah.
smart bin, they look like the book
Yes,
drops.
Yes.
So we'd love to be able to expand. We just this month placed our bins, and so we're tracking that data closely to figure out utilization numbers, because we can track how many people actually use it, but then also how much is being placed in there by weight. And when we go to expand, we will definitely go back to the community to figure out the best places to put those, because we want them placed
Are
equitably.
you able to
across the
share with the
district.
committee what it might take to do a neighborhood by neighborhood expansion? So that everyone in this geographical area might be able to participate.
So anybody can use the bins. So I think it would be just making sure geographically it was placed in a location where
That's right.
everyone could get to it. And so we're happy to work with that neighborhood on what would be the best location,
Okay.
because everybody can use it. Even if you don't have a smartphone, there's a key fob, so you can just type a code in and
Because
use
right
it.
now, what is driving the placement of those bins? Because it doesn't seem to be geography like a community. It's based on what?
well, we placed them 2 to 3 bins in each ward. And then we also made sure that they were in locations that were dense with apartment complexes, just because as we hopefully expand the curbside program, we're trying to be able to reach folks that wouldn't participate in the curbside program. And then we also went to different ANC meetings and got recommendations from community members on placement. There are only 30, but hopefully we'll be able to expand and have more of them. We
And
also
what
did
is
like
your-
parks and rec centers and stuff.
Assuming money is not a factor, what is your capacity to scale?
So we actually have the bin serviced by the same contractor that does the farmer's market. So it's just managing that load with the contractor. And then I believe it's about $4,000 for each bin, including installation.
Nice, nice. Okay. I've heard that the special waste events are very popular, and neighbors are excited about them every time they're announced, but that the events only allow for a subset of waste to be accepted, and they're not always accessible to those without cars. Many simply dump stuff in the trash that they try to figure out the complex web of types of waste that they should be depositing. Can you speak to why DPW is doing its special waste events as separate one-off events instead of a simple, consistent time and location where all special hazardous waste items can be taken?
We've had a difficult time finding a location to house these events, because if you've been to one, you need a large parking lot space to be able to have foot traffic come in, to be able to have vehicles come in. And then for our contractors who bring big trucks to be able to take the shredded paper out, the electronic devices. And so logistically, it's been difficult to find a location. We thought we were losing the RFK space, and so that's why they were moving around to other locations throughout the district. We were able to get that space back, which is just easiest logistically for us to work. And so, for the meantime, we're using RFK as the space for as long as we can, just because it's the largest space, that we could identify.
And is
for these
there an
events.
effort to make those more consistent, or this date every month, this is where this event is going to be, and
Yes.
here are all the types of waste that you can deliver?
Yes, and the types of waste is consistent because those are contractors take those.
I guess,
wastes.
to expand the types of waste that you would accept.
We haven't talked about expanding it. Right now, we're focused on household hazardous waste, electronics, and shredding services for documents. We do try to stay as consistent as possible. Right now, we're doing 2 per quarter, one on a Thursday and one on a Saturday. But we haven't talked about expanding the types of waste because we have people coming to Fort Totten to drop off just general waste in our residential ramp there.
Okay, and in my last minute and 30 seconds, I wanted to come to booting. And this is gonna be way in the weeds. I'm gonna get to my question, but just clarification based on your responses. It seems like the booting crews only work into 2:30 PM. Is that accurate? From 6 AM to 2:30 PM?
No, there's multiple shifts.
Okay, just based on the responses, and that just struck me as odd that we would only have them operating until 2:30 in the afternoon.
No, we have 2 shifts, and then in addition, we also participate in the nightlife task force, which is
Gotcha.
overnight.
Okay, last year, I believe you had 2 parking lots for cars that had been towed. And I believe you now open a third, is that?
Correct.
Yes.
Reed Street.
And
Yes.
here's the in the weeds question. So
Okay.
what is the length of stay that you would allow a car to be permitted to stay in the lot before you sell it or get rid of it?
We are allow Ms. Davis to answer.
Legally, it's 28 days. However, if an owner of vehicle is in bankruptcy proceedings and is contesting the tickets, that may be included in that.
So
There
this came,
are,
just for the sake of time, this came up last year. 28 days is an incredibly long amount of time, I think, if your car is impounded. How can we cut that time in half to maximize our ability to impound more vehicles?
legally, we can cut the time by amending the statute or doing a rulemaking. However, before we do so, we need to make sure that we can actually comply with the time frame, getting the notices out to the property owner, ensuring that the vehicle is not a stolen vehicle. We've got processes that we've got to complete internally before we reach out to the property owner to say, come get
So
your vehicle.
let me ask this way. Do you think 14 days is a realistic time
Not
frame?
yet. No,
It's not yet.
not yet.
Is there any timeline that's less than 28 days that would be realistic?
We were looking at 21 days.
21 days?
Yes.
And what would be when could we make that change
Well,
theoretically?
it's us working with a program so that they can say, we've got this down pat. We get this information out, and 21 days is enough time for an owner to reclaim their vehicle. And then we can move forward with the,
Thank you for letting me
changing.
go over my time. I would say anything we can do to shorten that amount of time. We should not be using district resources as a parking lot in many ways for 28 days. And so, thank you. Thank you.
And the new law does allow for rulemaking to modify the vehicle reclamation timelines. So you have the authority once you get the process down. Okay. We'll come back to that. Leaf. Back to leaf. Okay. Philosophically, what is the purpose of leaf collection?
The process?
The purpose.
Oh, the
Why do we do it?
She's going deep in philosophy.
We're going deep. I know, but
Hey.
this is it. We'll get to the operations, but why do we do it?
I mean, at the root of it is the wastewater system.
Okay.
You don't want the leaf particulate ending up in the combined sewer drains and clogging the system.
Which is sort of the same reason we do street sweeping, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Um, is that more of a concern in certain parts of the city than others?
I would say yes.
Is there some environmental push nowadays to allow leaves to decompose in place? And it's obviously a really big resource drain on the agency and the city to do leaf. So are those conversations that the agency has, or we just, right now, we got to stick with, we got to protect the wastewater system?
But I think it's actually it's a combination of things. Yes, it's the wastewater system. In addition, as long as the program has been around, it also is a vehicle for employment and getting
Mhm.
folks integrated back into the permanent workforce.
Mhm.
So it's a multifaceted question. But yes, we have those conversations on how we can make the program more efficient, what the coverage should be, and where appropriate, we push it up the chain of command.
Do you see any parts of the city that participate more than others?
I think we get pretty good participation across the board.
Yeah.
But I think certain areas of the city are more forested than others.
Yeah.
And in those areas, we get, particularly in the northern part of the city, tops of Ward 4 and 3 near the park, we get substantial participation, whereas the city core, where there's less trees, it's a little bit
Makes
less.
sense. Makes sense. Do you have a lot of participation in the year-round yard waste collection program?
Yes.
Okay. And is there still a separate contract for yard waste and leaf collection? I guess leaf collection's all in-house. Or is there contracting also?
So it's on I think the contracting is actually on the back end. It's the
Oh,
disposal piece.
The disposal piece, yeah.
Right.
Is that now one contract for all organic waste in yards? I
I'd
feel like it
have
was
to double,
two and then maybe it was.
I think it's it, right. It's MES in Maryland. I
Okay,
believe.
so they do both. They do year-round plus
I
leaf.
believe so.
Okay. Okay. Um. And what is the revised end date of leaf season?
We're going to roll through the end of this week and then continue on as we start, because March 1st we'll start
Sweeping.
sweeping. So technically the end of this week, but we'll continue to get leaves. We'll just be using a different group of staff who are doing ground maintenance.
Okay. Are they going to be accompanying the sweepers? How's that going to work?
It depends on what the material is. So if the leaves, small amount of leaf matter was left on the curb or accumulated after we came through the last pass and it started to decompose, that's something that the Pelican sweepers would get. They move much faster. They're able to lift it based on how they work. If it's still a large pile or a significant number of bags that have been put out, then that would be an actual grounds maintenance crew coming out with a garbage truck.
Okay. And is it the sweepers are going to notify grounds and maintenance to come get as they see it? How will it work? Or people will be calling it in?
I mean, a combination. My expectations that is if employees see something, they should notify another branch of the agency to come address it. We'll always answer the 311 requests that we get. And then I also expect my line supervisors to be out in the field watching their areas of responsibility.
We also have had sweep canvassing those neighborhoods to identify any piles of leaves that we still need to get. And we've been deploying staff to get those over the past couple weeks as well.
What's the message to the public about what to do about leaves that have been raked to curbs and are still remaining after March 1st?
If you're in section A or B, you should put in a service request. And if you're in section C or D, we're still in that area as of last week and as of this week through Saturday. And then if for whatever reason we don't get them, you can put in a service request at that time.
Okay. That's very clear. Thank you.
Councilmember, I need to make a correction.
Sure.
MES takes our yard waste year-round, but Acme Biomass takes our leaves and composts them.
Oh, okay. And does MES compost too, or what do
I'm
they do?
sorry.
Does MES also
Mhm.
compost?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, let's talk about public communications. Key component of issues raised by the public can be traced back to agency communications and constituent services. So how do you plan to continue improving the reach of DPW's messaging and ensuring clear communications around critical services?
Well, we do take the feedback that we get to heart. And so even as you clarified on the leaf brochure earlier, we'll make notes of that. One of the things we've also been doing before, especially large publications like the leaf brochure, is talking with council, talking with ANC and community groups, almost as like a test case. To see, read this and tell us if you think it makes sense. So I think that was a good addition and something we'll continue to do. Additionally, we're just trying to expand our reach because we know everybody gets information in different places. Of course, social media is great, but not everybody's on social media. And so we've been diversifying by going to different ANC meetings and community group meetings to capture folks in person. We've also been doing different outreach events, particularly a large event where we already have people gathered. We'll be sending folks to canvass those events to have a table there. And then we also have expanded our boots on the ground. So we have some folks, both our recycling outreach specialists and some folks on the communications team that are specifically in the neighborhoods, meeting with residents, meeting with buildings to try to get information out that way. Always open to feedback though on how we can improve.
I appreciate that, and I acknowledge that that's the case. What improvements to 311 and responses to service requests are you currently working on?
So the big thing that we did last year was the rollout of the Unified Communication Center. DPW had 6 different phone lines for 6 different departments and areas of need, and we consolidated all of those into one central line. And if you call in, there's a phone tree so that if you're looking for parking services, you can hit one, opposed to you want to order a new trash can, but at least you only have to have one phone number to get there. And then in addition to streamlining that phone number into one call center, we actually implemented an escalations team, an operational escalations team to go with it. So when someone calls, we're going to ask if they put in a service request. If they haven't, we're going to do that with them on the phone because historically we haven't been great about tracking every service request. And I want a service request for everything so that we can actually look at our impact and how quickly we're responding to requests, things like that. So we'll make sure you have a service request. If you've already put one in, we'll check to see if it's overdue. If that service level agreement is overdue, that's when we're kicking it to the deputy director's operational team to say, hey, this had a 13-day service request. This person just called and we can see that it's been 20 days. We need someone to go address it right now. And he'll deploy someone to go and address whatever that overdue service request is. So I think the consolidation with the operational component tied in has helped. Is there still room for improvement? Always. But I think that there has been a lot of strides in the right direction over the last year in this area.
And can you remind me, is the call center integrated with 311?
Yeah, so now 311, if you call 311, they're just going to kick you to that same number. They're only using that number as well.
That's great.
Yep.
Have you, could you explain more about internal 311 requests?
Yeah, so this is when you have to call 311 to actually put the request in. It wouldn't be on the app, it wouldn't be on the website. So so snow is our internal service request. And the reason we do that is because a lot of folks will like to call for snow removal as the snow has just started or the snow is still coming down. And so that's our way to try to ward off a lot of preemptive service requests, because our partners at 311 can say, hey, no, we're not taking service requests for this yet. we have to wait to put the snow removal service request in until after the snow has concluded.
Got it.
They're not-
Anything other than snow?
You know, we talked about it internally. Snow is the only service request that we haven't, that we function in this way.
If you had the budget for it, would you send out more postcard mailers?
I think that's a great way to reach people, and so it can be costly, but we do find it to be effective, especially for information that we want to get out to everyone. I think that can be a good way to diversify our communication.
You mentioned the DPW would benefit from increased staffing to improve outreach and community engagement. How many FTEs do you think could feasibly be used for that mission?
So we have our 6 recycling outreach specialists now, and that team is fully staffed. We also have our 22 sweep inspectors, and we have 7 folks on our comms team. And we do think they do a good job being able to spread information and awareness. Any additional staff that you bring on are just gonna increase that frequency and that footbeat that those staff have. And I think in addition to staff, or in lieu of additional staff, we can get creative about additional mailers and things like that to diversify where we might not be able to bring on FTEs.
Are sweep inspector jobs typically internal promotions, or are they coming from outside?
We have both. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's part of the career ladder.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Let's get into the solid waste program and let's see. Okay, we already did some of this, so let me just catch up with myself here. Now that it's projected to become law soon, how do you plan to implement the Clean Collections Act once fully funded?
For that, I believe we would need additional funding.
Right, we do have to fund it.
Yep.
Our hope is to fund it for FY 26.
So we can start the enforcement piece of it.
Okay,
Correct.
And then for the other components would need additional funding to implement.
we made a informal commitment to apartment owners that if enforcement wouldn't start before the new fiscal year because it's not funded. So we should talk about that.
Okay.
That was part of the back and forth on the dais about whether or not we needed to specifically add to the law that it doesn't go into effect until, because they wanted a date certain. So but let me just say, would this require any new rulemaking?
No.
I
No.
don't believe so.
Okay. But is it something the agency is looking forward to implementing once funded? I mean, how do you think it'll impact the overarching goals of waste diversion and recycling in the city and making sure that multifamily buildings are adequately managing trash and recycling?
Well, I mean, with as Ms. Smith has alluded to, we can start the enforcement education piece with the sweep inspectors and
Okay.
and have the inspectors go out and educate folks about what their responsibility, what the building's responsibilities are, with an eye towards the law becoming effective. And then I guess where we can, we will continue to install litter cans in certain areas where with the hope that would help abate the issue.
Sure. Okay.
We're not opposed to that piece at all, and think especially what Councilmember Henderson mentioned, and I know others have experienced some inadequate bin sizes for apartment complexes, or apartment complexes not fully funding to the appropriate level service, and so this could certainly help with that piece as we've been seeing that.
Seems like it could make the work of the inspectors a little easier. One of the things that we talked about a lot before passage was, is this an enforcement issue or is this an issue with the law? And my the thing I said over and over again was, if somebody calls in an issue at a building and the inspector comes the next day, but trash has already been collected, then they're not going to be able to write a citation for the fact that yesterday it was overflowing. So by making the threshold, the containerization volume, then an inspector can go and say, well, you have the right ones or you don't, right? So the hope is that it makes it easier for them and that even routine visits can be more fruitful. Okay, good, good, good. Are there any vacancies right now for sweep inspectors?
4.
Okay. So you, when you're at full force, then you'd be at 26?
Yes,
Actively recruiting?
Yes.
always.
Okay, great. What is the future of the recycling outreach specialist program? Any responsibilities that should be added, or should they be given any additional enforcement authority?
We are looking at the enforcement authority piece. Wanted to have them have a full operational year to really be able to see how that worked. So last year over their first year, they went to 860. They engaged with 860 different buildings, which is a lot. They're very busy. And we did find that of the buildings that they visited that were out of compliance, we saw a 55% increase in those buildings then coming into compliance. So we do feel like that's working, and I think the team is currently looking at what can be done to improve those who still do not want to come into compliance, and if we need enforcement authority there. So it's something we're still reviewing, but they've certainly been busy, and we've seen some fruits of those labors already.
And what constitutes compliance in this case? Is that the recycling plan? Is that, observing the
Right, yeah,
containers?
Exactly, both.
Both, okay. And what other responsibilities, you've mentioned some along the way today, do sweep inspectors have throughout the year in addition to solid waste compliance?
I mean, there's the educational piece as well. Trying to be proactive, pass along, like they're a force multiplier with the comms department. They're putting out information that we think is beneficial to the programs that we maintain to keep the city clean. Trying to get to the residents before it gets to a point where enforcement is necessary, fines are involved.
They also do QA/QC for snow and leaf. And then, like we mentioned earlier, a big piece of their role is actually attending those hearings as well.
Before I hand the mic over, are they the ones tasked with ticketing snow shoveling violations?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it actually feasible for them to be doing that during a snow event?
The violation doesn't occur until after the snow event has ended. Remember,
Okay.
it's 8 hours after the end of the snow event. So after our internal snow event is over, then they return to their duties as inspectors and enforce snow shoveling violations.
This is not a gotcha. I'm truly just trying to understand if this is something reasonable for DPW to be doing, given the other workloads. Are they actually issuing snow shoveling citations?
They do. I
Okay.
don't know about the volume of them.
Yeah.
Because it depends.
Mhm.
But they do issue the violations.
So if someone calls in a 311 request for snow shoveling violation, a sweep is meant to be dispatched.
Yes.
Okay.
And additionally, they do QA/QC for snow after the event. So they're going around and figuring out how passable a certain road is, right?
Uh-huh.
And then that feeds to a map and we deploy staff accordingly.
Okay.
So they might see even proactively before someone puts in a 311 request, a sidewalk that has been unplowed as they're out anyway doing QA/QC.
Could I have a list or the number of snow event citations that have been issued this year, this calendar year? Okay, great. I'm going to pass the gavel over to my
Councilmember?
colleague in Ward 7. Yes, ma'am.
200 issued in 2025.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more than I thought you were going to say. Okay. Not that I ever have doubt in the sweep inspectors, but they're
Mhm.
very busy. Okay. Member Felder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to dive deeper into your snow removal operations.
Sure.
What outreach and communication efforts does DPW have in place to inform residents about snow emergency routes, parking restrictions, and plowing schedules?
So I believe the maps and all of that information is available on the snow team's website. In addition, we coordinate with the communications department of the executive office of the mayor to ensure that we are feeding information to the mayor and the city administrators, press releases. In addition, during the course of leading up to the storm and during the course of the storm, DPW and DDOT executive members speak with the press, do interviews and such where we pass along information as well. We try and hit as many avenues of communication as possible.
Got you. Are you, while you guys send your correspondence out, is members of your team tracking social media outlets?
Yes, absolutely. So we
Okay.
have two people in particular that's what they're doing during snow, is both posting and tracking correspondences via social media.
Thank you. How does DPW handle complaints from residents whose streets remain unplowed for extended periods? And what improvements are being made to the response system?
So typically those instances get flagged to my attention, and at that point, then I am personally marshaling the resources and sending them where they need to go. I know, for instance, up near Klingle Road, there's a number of smaller streets and dead ends that have traditionally not received services right away. The past two storms, I have made it my mission, and I have worked with the ANC, and I've talked to residents. I've personally gone up myself to those areas to make sure that the side streets were taken care of. In the last snowstorm, I actually ran into one of the ANCs around 1 o'clock in the morning, and we took a selfie in front of the snowplow. But it's just making sure that we're noting the traditional areas and we're learning from history so it doesn't repeat itself. And that's our effort.
From your experience, would you say that there are any budget constraints? And if any, how is that impacting DPW's ability to provide adequate snow removal services, and what funding increases are needed to improve service delivery?
We don't have any issues with funding. The mayor and Director Reed have been very supportive as it relates to snow removal operations, so I don't have any needs.
Shifting to workforce management and accountability questions. Can you provide an update on DPW's current staffing levels and whether they are sufficiently meeting the city's service demands?
Sure. I mean, from an overarching point of view, it's DPW. Some of our services are hard on staff and we do have turnover. However, we have a dedicated HR team and we consistently post vacancies as soon as they arrive and we're allowed to put them up. Depending on the type of position that is open, some of the recruitments take longer than others. Backfilling for an administrator over solid waste is going to take considerable more time than, say, backfilling a sanitation technician who rides on the back of a garbage truck.
We have 154 vacancies right now. And they're in several stages of the process. For example, 30 have posted. We're in interviews for 23 of them. 7 are in the final stages. We have 124 that aren't posted, and some of those are pending DCHR's approval. So they're in various stages. But we work really hard to move them through, and our average time to fill is 62 days, which aligns with DCHR's timeline of 60 days to fill for agencies over 1,000.
Just a follow-up question. What percentage of DPW's workforce is dedicated to illegal dumping versus snow removal?
We'd have to follow up on the exact percentage.
Well, I mean, in short, when snow is on the ground, every DPW employee is technically a part of the snow team. Depending on the amount of snow we get, depends on how many different units we will pull from to staff to respond to snow. So they are multi-tasked.
What accountability measures are in place to track employees' performance and ensure assigned tasks such as snow removals and illegal dumping cleanups are completed efficiently?
I mean, we every employee is subject to annual review with their manager, consistent with the regulations promulgated in the district personnel manual. My expectation is that if there are areas of deficient performance, that the managers are to raise it with the employees and note it in the performance evaluations, and their score should reflect that.
Follow up. How does, follow-up question to that, how does DPW's process, or could you walk me through DPW's process to handle employees who, employee misconduct or repeated failures to complete assignments?
Sure, we as a subordinate agency, we adhere to the DPM under the guidelines that are promulgated by DCHR. So under the DPM, if an employee has, just to pose a hypothetical along the lines of what you're talking about, if there was an issue with performance related to illegal dumping, the first course of action is for the supervisor to counsel the employee. Now, that verbal counseling does not constitute actual discipline, but it is the first step in the process. Hopefully that will address the situation. At the same time, that instance should be noted in the employee's performance review as well. So it's dual tracked. If there are repeated instances of deficient behavior, then the manager is to work through the DPM and the steps of progressive discipline.
What steps is DPW taking to improve workforce efficiency and ensure that work is being completed on schedule?
So recently we created, in the past fiscal year, we created a chief performance officer position. And that purpose was to strengthen our data management team. And the manager oversees several data analysts, and the information feeds that we're getting from 311 or from internal reporting related to leave for snow operations, we go through the data to look for trends, to see areas where we might be deficient or where we're performing well. Things that we're doing well, we keep. Things that we're not, we either tweak or jettison. And if there are areas of deficient performance, we then try to find solutions to increase our performance levels.
Since bringing on you said the chief
Chief
the
performance
chief
officer.
performance officer, since bringing on the chief performance officer, from your perspective, would you say that has improved your government efficiency?
Yeah, and one example of that would be when I was talking earlier about getting vehicles off the lot faster and creating more space. So that was actually an effort where our data team partnered with our parking enforcement team to review the operational procedures, find efficiencies, and then actually actualize those to be able to move vehicles off the lot faster.
I've gotten, well, thank you.
Mhm.
I've gotten complaints recently about, there's been situations where there's been illegal dumpings, and then they'll tweet about it. And then DPW may put in this system that this service was done when it wasn't. Could you walk me through the factors used to determine when to close out a 311 ticket? And what's your definition of like complete versus just, going to the scene?
So by and large, success for DPW is pass fail. The types of service that we provide, either it's done or it's not. Now, there may be some types of service requests where it's a gray area where a resident has an expectation that it needs to be completed to a certain level and the agency doesn't. But for things like trash collection, recycling collection, or collecting the materials dumped illegally, either they're picked up or they're not. If they're not picked up, then we didn't complete the task. And then that's an area where we need to improve. Now, I can personally walk you through one example, which I alluded to earlier. A resident reached out to me from Ward 8, where they had noticed that there was a large amount of commercial materials that had been dumped in a back alley. I sent the crew out. The crew picked it up within 24 hours. And at that point, the resident that afternoon went and said, "Hey, you did a great job, but you didn't get all of it. You had to go a little bit further around the corner." So in that instance, we did address the legal dumping. The ticket was closed, but there were more materials that we were unaware of. But as soon as we found out about it, we went back and addressed it. And in particular with legal dumping, the other issue too is that it's a twofold process. The sweep inspector has to go out first, kind of lay out how big the task is going to be, and then you have to have the second stage of the SLA where the crew actually goes out and removes the materials.
Madam Chair, may I ask one more question? Um, Clean teams. I know that you have your inspectors, specific business districts have clean teams. Do you coordinate with clean teams? And if so, please describe to me what that process looks like.
So, yes, there are two levels. There's the bids and then there are the clean teams. So the bids have their own, depending on their size and their level of funding, they put out teams similar to mine, and they maintain their area of operation. They collect public litter cans, they do litter picking, some of them do graffiti services. Then there are the clean teams, and the clean teams can be created, I believe, by a grant process. And they can be as small as a couple of blocks, they can be as big as an entire corridor. It just really depends. And we have had conversations with the director that oversees that entity, and we are committed to supporting them wherever possible. I mean, they're a force multiplier. So we absolutely like the clean teams, and we will continue to use them moving forward.
Thank you. That concludes my questions. I look forward to working with you and other members of your team, moving forward, and be on the lookout for my dozen outstanding constituents. that are
Absolutely.
expressed.
Send them on over.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. It's just us now. See how it goes. Okay. Regarding the SWAMA Swift shift that's been added, given its success, do you plan to make this permanent? And would there be an additional fiscal impact to doing so? I jinxed it. You put me on the clock, Nicole. Thanks.
So the swing shift is continuing this year. It is funded. Those employees have just shifted back over to collections. It is working. To my knowledge, based on the reporting I get every day, they have ensured that we haven't had any carryover routes for the past week and a half or so that they've been back. There won't be any additional fiscal impact beyond what we previously had. So it's funded through this year.
The fiscal impact, though, just to be clear, is the 21
The
temporary
21
staff that
temporary.
actually work on that shift.
And how are they dispatched? Who tracks where they're needed?
That is, they are assigned to the collections division. And it is the administrator over collections who works with his route supervisors to figure out where they need to plug holes based on staffing on each day.
Got it.
Which is why they come in later in the day, so they don't start till 10, because at that point, we know which
Who's called
routes have
out.
not been deployed.
Correct.
Yeah. Could something similar be created for bulk collections or spillage from residential cans that are encountered in the course of SWARMA's typical shifts?
So with the spillage, let's just say for now, escalating it and having the route supervisor go out to the site, I think is effective because it forces the route supervisor to then grade the work of the crews that they're assigned to. Moving forward, we could look, if that's not effective, we could look to something different.
How do you typically get reports of spillage?
It combination of avenues, 311 requests, and then sometimes it comes in as like a dirty alley, and then in the notes there's an explanation that a crew went through this morning and now the alley's dirty. Sometimes we also get calls directly to our internal call center, and then Ms. Smith and I both receive emails quite frequently when it occurs.
Is that something, is spillage something that's been sort of a regular conversation with crews?
It's a constant conversation. Our agency is centered on customer service, and as part of delivering good customer service, it's making sure that when you do a task, you do it effectively and you do it thoroughly. So if you spill something and you notice it, you should pick it up.
Yeah. Right. Do you tend to see is that that's more of an issue with recyclables since they're loose, or is it also an issue with people improperly bagging trash?
But I'd definitely say it's both. Um, Sometimes you encounter residents when I go through the alleyways just checking up on the crews. Sometimes you encounter super cans that are overflowing, or there's loose trash, or people walking through the alley have deposited loose trash. And
Yeah.
when that happens and the lid's not down on the can, it then becomes a food source to, various types of rodents or raccoons. Um, Recycling, yes, that's a constant conversation with the crews, to remind them that we don't just pick up what's in the bin. If there are certain recyclable materials like Amazon boxes or furniture boxes that are too large to place in the cans that we provide, the expectation is that they pick up the loose materials on the side of the can as well.
And I think that is an evolution in the way that we've collected recyclables, because there used to be a very firm message that if it's not in the can, we're not getting it. So I appreciate that clarification. Referencing question 60 of your pre-hearing responses. What explains the significant spike in warning notices issued between FY23 and FY24? And I'll note while you're pulling it up, residential warning notices increased from 427 to 1,428, and commercial notices increased from 63 to 230.
So Mr. Thompson has done a great job coming in and really moving the sweep team forward. And that's something that he's instituted, as if we're finding something, we're at least issuing a warning, right?
Mhm.
And so maybe it doesn't rise to the level of an infraction, or maybe we don't have enough information like Ms. Davis was talking about before to actually issue an infraction, but that we should at least be using that as an education piece. So we're using warnings as a mechanism for education, which is why you see the spike there. That was intentional and a lot of work on his part and the team's part.
That's great. One of my favorite topics, containers. Woo, okay. Yours too, I know. I feel like you'd be hard pressed to go around the country and find people that are more excited about containers than the people in this room right now, but
You guys should go to the Waste Expo. I saw a lot
I-
of people that were excited about containers there.
send us the deets. Janice and I'll go. Okay. Were the Big Belly and Smart Compost acquisitions one-time procurements, or could you acquire more with budget enhancement? I feel like I'm gonna word that question a little differently. Those are obviously one-time. Oh,
So
do you have
I think
servicing
I know,
costs?
I think
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. So we
The
didn't do the
contract,
big
yeah.
bellies. We did not move forward with big bellies. There were
Okay.
some procurement issues there. I'll leave that be. For the smart cans, the compost bins, we actually bought those bins.
Okay,
So the district owns those. They're about $4,000 a piece, including installation. The ongoing cost is obviously servicing those bins, which we do through our farmers market
Contract.
contracted partner.
yes,
And
okay,
based on volume, which we don't really know yet, right? We're monitoring it.
sure,
That will be the increased cost. there.
right. And you talked about this earlier with a colleague, I can't remember who asked, but the scale up would be whatever that contract can bear plus the cost of
Yeah,
more
plus
containers.
$4,000 approximately.
container, yeah. Can you get into the issue with the Big Belly procurement?
So there's only one company that kind of provides it, so we had to reissue a procurement, and it was just a length of time issue to be able to procure it in fiscal year 24.
Not related to the procurement, but related to the big bellies. In addition, since that time frame, I would say that the trash industry and the technology that it uses has had some evolutions. Ms. Smith and I recently met with a company that offers more innovative public litter cans. they are interested in a pilot. We have to work through with legal and OCP to see if it's something that we can engage in. But there are newer technologies out there that I think are more efficient than, no knock on Big Belly. I mean, some jurisdictions use them and they work, but from my point of view and talking with my operational folks, I think there's other technologies out there now that we would like to explore that could make operations more efficient and address some of the issues that the residents are raising about spillage, illegal dumping, rodent vectors.
They're very costly too per unit. Can't remember how much they are per unit, but they're not $4,000. They're very costly.
Intriguing. I look forward to hearing more about that. And I think, you know, we hear testimony all the time about better trash receptacles, right? But a lot of the testimony we hear is not very forward thinking, right? It's like our trash carts should be metal, which I don't want to get into that because I don't support that anyway. But the point is that if we're gonna adapt, let's adapt, you know, with new tech and better ways of doing
Certainly.
things rather than just sort of repurposing the same old ideas. So I look forward to, when you can, hearing more about that potential pilot. In that pilot mode, is there a cost to the district?
That's the piece that we have to work with OCP on because I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to make any representations
Yeah.
that I can't then follow through on.
Okay. When do you think we'll hear more?
Yeah, we're just waiting to hear back from OCP and their guidance.
I know some people there, so if you want, I can check. Tomorrow we have them here, maybe in the same room. I don't know. Okay. Speaking of trash carts, why does the average repair of a residential cart take a year plus, whereas delivering a new one can take about a month? Although, put a pin in that. Is there a back order right now on the new cans?
It just came in.
It just came in?
It just came in.
Woo. And is it enough to fulfill the pending requests at the moment?
I mean, the demand ebbs and flows. I think this shipment, it's a tractor trailer's load worth, so it should be enough to address whatever backlog is existing now, but in the interim, more requests will come in.
For sure. But the people have been waiting a few months.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, okay, so then why does it take up to a year to repair?
So I'm glad you asked because traditionally it did take a long time to repair cans. We had a very small internal crew that was handling that and demand just outstripped the resource. However, since last fiscal year, we have actually had a contract in place with a company that has taken over repair service requests. And I can report, this isn't an exact figure, but I believe we renewed the contract at the end of last fiscal year, we had a backlog of something like 7,000
Oh, God.
SRs for repairing household litter cans, the super cans and recycling bins. The contractor has already completely gone through and eliminated the backlog. And I saw the numbers yesterday because I get a weekly update. They've gone through at least 700 and change just for FY25 already. So
Just for January and February.
just
of
yeah,
this
well,
month.
yeah, just for January and February. So the wait period is not a year anymore. As we're getting them, we are sending the contractor out.
Okay, I've been joined by our Ward 4 colleague, Councilmember Lewis George. And would you like an opening statement? All right, we'll start your clock after that.
Awesome. Thank you, Chairwoman Nadeau, and thank you to the witnesses who made time to testify, and thank you to our government witnesses who are here today. I want to first start by saying thank you to our DPW workers who have worked incredibly hard through the heat, through the cold, through the rain, through the sleet and the snow. You are frontline workers who have kept and continue to keep this city going. My constituents want you to know that you are valued and appreciated. We know it is hard work, but it does not have to be thankless work. And we want to say thank you. first and foremost. DPW is quite possibly the most visible agency in district government because DPW employees are responsible for a wide array of municipal services, right? From residential trash to recycling collection to street cleaning to parking enforcement, leaf collection, alley cleaning, and so much more. And as a result of these varied responsibilities and functions, the bulk of constituent service requests that come into our office to our Ward 4 office involves DPW. My office gets dozens of DPW-related calls, a lot that are positive, and some that are due to sort of missed leaf collection or tree collection or of things of those nature. So I am here by my Ward 4 constituents and ANC commissioners with the ability to just ask questions about how we can even make those services requests go down and make our work, you all work more efficiently, effectively, and and help make our community a safe, clean, and healthy space to be in. So with that, I will start my questions around where we are hearing from Ward 4 constituents and ways we can see improvements. But also I want to thank DPW's community engagement team, who every time we have a community event and we ask them to show up for community, they show up. They show up with information, they show up with materials, and you all have done a great job, communication team. Your communications team has been excellent, communicating constantly with our community, whether on Twitter, on social media, on the listservs, the emails. When I came here 2 years ago asking better community engagement, better communications, across the board, I've seen that improvement. It's been great. And so we're grateful for that. We've seen better responsiveness, especially with leaf cleanup, trees, et cetera. So I just want to note where we've seen and towing of vehicles and doing that. So we see the work that's happening and we appreciate it. I want to start with abandoned vehicles, sort of area where we've seen improvement. Now that we've had the additional impoundment lots, where are we as far as what is the sort of status of now DPW's ability to tow more vehicles with the additional lot that was procured?
So just in general, as we're pulling up the stats, the third lot has helped.
Okay.
We are moving vehicles on a consistent pace. We currently have enough capacity to hold everything that we're impounding. And as we've talked before you arrived to the hearing, we are looking to find ways to increase the volume that we're moving off of the lots. And
Okay.
one of those ways is the legislation that gave us the ability to change the timeline that we hold vehicles.
Great.
And that's just finding the sweet spot for notifying the owners, giving them a chance to try and square up their account and reclaim their property before we either scrap or auction it. And in terms of the numbers, our current capacity is 1,303 vehicles between the three lots.
Wonderful. And has that sort of been that is sort of that increase in lot space has allowed you all to what I see more cars being towed and booted. You've allowed you to have that significant increase that we see in the pre-hearing responses.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. How many agents are sort of responsible, like how many agents are responsible for reviewing abandoned or dangerous vehicle complaints?
7.
7, okay. And is that the number that you all believe is the amount you need, or are those vacancies that you're still waiting to fill?
Yes, Mr. Gaither believes that that's the appropriate number.
Okay, so 7 will be the appropriate for us to service the entire city.
Yes.
Okay. And then how do their abandoned vehicle, dangerous vehicle complaints, those are being funneled through 311 to you all?
Yes.
And then those workers are being dispatched?
Correct.
Okay. And of how many sort of abandoned vehicle complaints have you all seen come in this year? Has there been an increase or is it steadily from last year?
Bear with us.
I have the number for. Oh, wait. FY 24.
292 in FY '24.
Okay. I know we, we've seen that number for, I think we have seen an ability for abandoned vehicles that time between a 311 request to be put in and a vehicle to be addressed. For some neighbors, it's been longer than they expected. What, sort of the time they put the 311 request and the time that the vehicle either is, ticketed or some action, some response to their 311 request. What can we do to improve that time between those two things?
That's a kind of a tough one. I mean, obviously, we're beholden to the SLAs. With some of the vehicles, depending on how much they owe, as I've talked about earlier in my testimony, it becomes kind of a cat and mouse game, and it just takes a little bit longer. Sometimes the investigator gets out there, the vehicle's not there.
Got it.
And under those circumstances, we'll note it. If it's a particularly egregious offender, then we've gotten a lot of complaints about the vehicle, Mr. Gaither or Mr. Moore will instruct the tow crane operators and the supervisors to note a hotspot.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
One thing to add to that has to meet a certain criteria too.
True.
Oh, yeah,
So
of course.
sometimes people think something's abandoned, but it doesn't meet,
Meet that.
we can't just go make that judgment call, right? It has to meet the criteria. And so sometimes when we get complaints, it won't meet the criteria for abandoned vehicle, but we can tow it because it's a scofflaw.
Wow.
So we'll still get it. My fear in that situation is when I'm going back and forth in email with people, it's like, well, that it didn't technically meet the criteria. I could get it on another technicality, but just know that there are criteria that we have to meet before we can tow those. And just to clarify, the 292 is the amount of impounds we've done of abandoned vehicles.
That's what I was
not
asking.
Service request calls.
Got it. Okay. I want to talk about, at the end of last year, we passed clean collections with some heartburn, but Councilman Nadeau is amazing, so we got it through. I will be aimed at funding it. So my ask is that, I'm not gonna ask you now, my ask is that because my intent is to find the funding and fund this, that DPW comes to the table and let me know what will be helpful for making it something you all can be excited for, and easy to integrate into the already system you all have, as we move forward. Go ahead.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to working with you.
Okay. As far as what before clean collections happened, what are we seeing as far as how many infractions have you put in towards buildings this past year for inadequate trash, either inadequate trash pickup or inadequate trash containers?
Yeah, we'll have to follow up on the exact number. I will say we have a little bit of a force multiplier here because it's not just the sweep team, but our recycling outreach specialists will also note this. They made contact with 860 buildings this last year.
Wonderful. Okay.
And so they also pick up on, not only do you not have recycling, we have an inappropriate container size situation here. And so they'll also flag those things. So there are
Okay.
teams working together on that.
And then am I right that when that happens, what's the system? Do you do a warning first and then do a ticket, or how does that
Right,
work?
and we're working with them to come into compliance. So we try to come up with a plan with them to come into compliance. Then we'll go back a certain number of days later, and if they still can't show us a plan, or like a contract they've signed
Mhm.
with a private hauler, then we could issue an infraction.
Okay. And then what's the infraction amount?
I don't know what the infraction amount is.
Okay.
I think
Generally, the first offense is $150 for a commercial property.
Okay.
I'm sorry, generally, first offense for a commercial property is $150, and then it escalates from that point on.
Okay.
300, 600, and then 2,000.
Okay. And then the smaller buildings, we've seen some of the largest offenses happen. What's the step for the smaller buildings?
It's the same.
Same.
They're still considered commercial residential.
They're still
property.
commercial no matter the size of the
Yes.
occupants. Okay, got it. One thing that came up this year, and I think I emailed with you, was that childcare centers. There was a
Yeah.
issue, you remember, we worked on this, and I didn't know it was an area that we needed to legislate or not legislate in, but childcare centers, someone called on a childcare center and said, hey, they don't have enough
Yeah.
trash cans because they're operating a childcare center. And then that person was told that I think that they had to come into compliance and basically hire a private hauling company because they're a childcare center, which hiring a private hauling company for a childcare center can be a heavy task for our residential childcare centers. There seems to be no sort of real guidance across the board what our childcare centers, whether there's an exception for childcare centers or not. But if I think the general rule right now is because they're a childcare center, they have to procure a private hauler.
They were treated as a small business,
Business.
right? And so they did need to get a hauler. What we did, because that instance kind of highlighted what might be a larger issue. I worked with the deputy mayor for education
Okay.
and OSSI to try and figure out how we could come up with guidance just so that people understood and were more clear on what the regulations were. And then continue to work with them on, should we do some sort of grant for folks to be able to pay for the service or where we want to go. But that's an ongoing conversation that we're having with them.
Yeah, because what happened in that instance is that one neighbor complained on that
Right.
person. So now they're being forced to hire a private hauler, but the rest of the child care centers who are operating across our city are still using residential trash. So there has to be some fairness there with the child care centers and some thought given for, because of the nature of their work,
Certainly.
how we want to move forward as a city. I don't think they should have to hecklers for residential childcare centers. But whether I feel it or not, we have to decide as a city what that policy needs to be moving forward. So one neighbor can't make it so that one childcare center is sort of enforced when they were looking right across the street at their neighbor who does the same work, who
Right.
isn't being held to that same standard. Thank you for the work you've already done though with the Deputy Mayor for Education and OSSI on that work. I want to ask about the RPP parking enforcement or in general parking enforcement. As you know, we have the issue, Ward 5 and Ward 4 have the issue where we have large trucks who just park for times on end. You know, I'm talking the big company trucks that park and then just leave their truck cars there. What are we doing to enforce those bad actors? Because they'll just move to another part of our ward and sit there until we get enough complaints. What are we doing there to improve that?
I mean, you've kind of hit the nail on the head again. Like with many of the issues that we're discussing today, this becomes cat and mouse. Like we will enforce the posted signage and the permitting and issue NOIs wherever the violations are. Short of that, I'm not sure what within the current system we could do better. We definitely would be open to working with your office on
Yeah.
creating some sort of solution that gives us more tools in the arsenal to combat this, because it is an ongoing issue that we're aware of.
Yeah. For example, like in Ward 4, Piney Branch across the street from the Safeway, it's constant. You all probably get that tweet every day from the
Yes,
same
we do.
former ANC commissioner. He lives across the street. It's never going to stop, by the way. So my point is, I think what we can do is I need DPW to be the observer, essentially. Like, we know that they continue to do it. They'll park there and then leave their vehicle there for a number of hours. I think noting it as a hotspot and having someone do routine enforcement there is enough, which should be enough, I think, to deter them because they get tired. But I once thought we could get a tow truck big enough to tow one of those. That'd be too much money to do. But I just want us to continue to work on that issue. I'm finished for this round. I have one more 3-minute round. Thank you.
We are gonna do like a bathroom break for the, do you want to just finish? Okay, why don't you
Actually,
finish and then we'll do that break. Is that okay? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. So, again, I just want to see let's come up with a plan of action for those continued offenses, for those vehicles, and what we can come back and do. Alley cleaning, continues to come up as an issue. The sweep team is responsible for alley cleaning, flagging alley cleaning,
Flagging,
or
yes.
coming up with a plan for alleys we clean.
They flag issues, issue citations, and they contribute to the cleanup. They help us determine what sort of resources are needed to address what sort of issues they encounter.
Okay,
So they're the eyes and ears.
okay. So is it effective right now when my community does a 311 request for alley cleaning that then allows DPW to at least consider that alley for cleaning, a stronger cleaning than what I guess what you normally would do?
Yes, if it goes beyond just a regular maintained alley that it could be taken care of with one pass with the sweeper, we do have an escalation team that handles the service requests, and they will go in and they'll take if it takes an entire shift, it takes an entire shift, and they
Okay.
will handle every issue that they come across, from vegetation management to cleaning up bulky items.
Got it. Okay. These last three questions are from my seniors specifically. I hope that they're watching because I told them I would ask. They believe that the rats are eating through the trash cans, and that the trash can material that we use is inadequate. I did have a hole in my trash can. I don't know if it was rat, but I did. So I told them, okay, I'll ask. What are you all considering as far as changes in trash can materials? And do you believe that it's possible that rats are eating through our current trash cans?
Oh, it's
They are.
absolutely possible that the rats are eating through
Okay.
the cans.
To get to the food waste.
To get to the food
Yes,
waste.
of course.
So
So-
first, take that out.
Okay, so with the cans, because of the layout of the District of Columbia, we do not use some of the trucks that other jurisdictions are able to. The alleys just aren't big enough. So we use rear loading trash cans. The lifting mechanism, the hydraulic mechanism that lifts the heavy can and dumps it into that, the can is built to that lifter. So that is the industry standard. I know that some of the companies are looking into more rat resistant or rodent resistant materials, and we are happy to look into that. But right now, the cans that we procure on behalf of the residents, that's the industry standard. One of the things that I would encourage everybody to look into, and we've talked about this, as we hopefully expand the food composting, the food waste composting program, that people will enroll in that, because if you take the food out of the waste stream, the rats are no longer interested in the waste stream. They will move on. They will just, if there's no food source, there's no rats. So to the extent that people can get into the program, we encourage them to. There's still some vacancies available
I
in
know
this
they
fiscal year.
for.
We're district
Well,
wide.
there's a wait list for the
Yeah.
curbside composting, but now we have our new public
Correct.
bins,
Okay.
which we put at rec centers and things. Like, we tried to put them in central locations that were easy for people
Got
to
it.
get to. And so now anybody can technically compost by using those bins or the farmers markets if they
Got
want
it.
to.
It's hard for me to get seniors into composting.
I know.
I'm
I know.
working really
I know.
hard. I promise you I am.
I
The
know.
idea of it to them is just like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm trying.
But
I really am.
like for folks like that, seniors or otherwise, right? Leading with the rat message is actually really effective. 'Cause
Yeah.
people might not want to do it for other reasons, and that's fine. But we haven't had rats getting into our compost bins. And so it really does help to get those out of your general waste stream and into the specific
Got it.
either bins that we have or the larger bins that we just procured for
Okay.
public use.
Is it safe for me to tell them sort of there's no intent right now for you all to change the materials of the trash cans?
Well, we're always open to looking to see what industry offers. I'm not saying it's off the table. It just has to be something that's that we can manage the cost with the functionality. So does the juice, warrant the squeeze?
Got it. So cost, alley size,
Does it mesh with our equipment? Yes.
equipment, and all of those things. Okay, I can take that back to them for that. And then when they believe that their trash can was damaged because of the handling of it by DPW workers, who do they go through? Should they be going through DPW, Office of Risk Management? Because they don't want to buy new trash cans because they don't believe it was their fault that their trash can lid is off. And so they did just text me that they're listening. So good. I'm glad you're talking
Awesome.
directly to them. This is helpful.
Okay, so For those folks that have joined us.
Yes.
If your can was damaged and we have a contractor on board, as I've just mentioned, we have a contractor on board that does actually service cans for repairs. Now, these are things such as like the hinge on your lid is broken. We can replace certain things like that. If it's something a little more egregious, if in the course of collecting one of our truck drivers mismaneuvers the truck and your can gets squished, please call into our unified communication center, relay over the information, and then internally we will just verify that that's what occurred, and then we will own up to it and we'll replace the can.
Okay, so they go through you all, they don't have to go to risk management and go through a whole claim process?
For those specific circumstances, if it's something related to that, because then we will open, typically what we do is our safety folks will open an e-risk entry and then ORM will follow up on their side. But for getting the resident the new can, if we broke it, obviously we will replace it or fix it.
Okay, understood. My last thing is, we have certain areas in the city, that, and I have a list, so you are fine, and I think we've given it over. When we do have snow, when we do have, for whatever, leaf, tree, and snow, these areas sort of get forgotten on the map. I will continue to send, I'll send over that list, but if there's a way that that list can become permanent, so that I don't have to continue to do that, we would appreciate it. That's in like my Chevy Chase Hawthorne neighborhood, a minor part of, Crestwood and a minor part of Shepherd Park that just happens to be missed. I would like to make it permanent so that we don't have to continue to do that. Those are the only areas where I heard mass complaints about leaf, tree, snow, but for the greater part of the ward did not hear. So just want to go through that list with you and make sure it becomes permanent.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it is now 12:14 PM. We are going to recess until 12:30 PM.
My seniors are so funny. They're like at Hattie Homes.
right, we're back. It's 12:30. Yep, there it is. Okay. Let's talk about recycling. Can you tell me the current contamination rate for our recycling?
Old.
Sure.
The residential recycling contamination rate, the most recent number we have is 28.5%. Commercial recycling contamination rate, is 26.3%.
Is that, any idea how that matches national standards? averages?
I believe that is lower than national standard. Yeah, it's lower than the national standard.
Do we recycle glass? I mean,
Yeah.
in reality, what happens to the glass?
She always asks.
So-
us.
I know, we're just trying to
She's
make
always
a
asking
case.
and hoping for a different response.
Trying to make a case for a different way. Okay.
Yeah, we accept glass. It's
We
our
accept
recycling.
glass.
But it goes in the back of the truck, gets crushed,
And our
and ends
end
up as.
user has told us that they are, their reports from our end destination says that they are recycling the glass. There are always gonna be things that don't get recycled because of, some sort of contamination.
It gets-
process, but
Glass though typically gets downcycled if it's in a single stream recycling. Presumably it's not being used again as glass containers.
My understanding is that
Right.
that is correct.
Yeah. Which hurts my soul, but is not uncommon. Do we make money from selling any of our recyclables like cardboard?
So it depends, it depends on the market and it depends on what the composition of our recycling stream is.
Mhm.
Certain items like cardboards are highly sought after and they give a better rate of return than something like glass, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
And it's lighter than glass.
it's lighter, so you can get more volume. So it kind of works out in the wash. What we receive might be offset by what we have to, in some instances, actually pay.
Yeah. Recycling, hauling is more expensive than landfill waste. Do I have that right? Or
It's not so much the hauling rate, it's the processing.
the processing rate? We
Correct.
pay more for recyclables than we do for,
Yes.
yes, okay. So we have legislation pending, the council, to create a bottle deposit program, which would ostensibly remove plastic bottles, glass bottles, and aluminum containers from our recycling stream because people will want to redeem them for the 10 cents. How would that change our recycling costs and operations?
Well, I mean, the simple fact that you subtract something out of what we have to haul reduces cost because we pay by the ton
Mm-hmm.
to move materials. So if we're able to make fewer trips, you're reducing our hauling costs, which reduces our overarching bill. It also, if those materials are not then going to the MRF to be sorted, then that could potentially reduce our costs in that regard as well. The other area where it may help, as you've alluded to, when glass goes into the back of the truck compacts the load, and if the glass breaks and is pulverized and impregnates some of the materials with pulverized glass, you have contamination. If you have contamination and the load gets rejected, we then have to pay a fee and then dispose of the material as trash, which is another expense. So you could be potentially reducing our costs by removing those materials just on weight and contamination rate alone.
How often is a load rejected due to contamination?
That I would have to check on you. I don't
Okay.
have the figure.
And how often would glass not be pulverized in the back of the truck?
Well, yeah.
If it's not
Ms.
put in the
Ms. Davis
truck.
said when it's not put in the
If
truck.
it's not recycled, it's not pulverized.
I guess certain processors have different levels, contamination rates that they're willing to accept. So it would just really depend on the content of the load and what the processor's willing to accept.
So we got rid of those containers largely. What would be left that we'd be hauling mainly?
Mostly paper product and
Yeah.
cardboard.
There'd still be some
There would be some.
Some
plastics.
plastics,
There'd still be some plastics like your,
berry
your cook-
containers,
food containers.
Yeah.
Or things of that nature.
Yeah.
but Most of it would be.
paper
removed.
products,
Yeah.
Tin cans, like.
Well,
the
cans.
soup cans.
Soup cans, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good information. Thank you. I don't know if that bill's gonna get a hearing anytime soon, and I don't know if you're gonna be invited, so I thought it would be a good idea to ask the question. What would it take to bring curbside composting in-house as a standard part of DPW collections? And is that a desirable path forward?
That's something we're looking into. I'm not sure that we're there yet. I think we need to add participants in the way that the program stands, but definitely something we've looked at. We would essentially create another division under our solid waste administration. We'd obviously need to hire additional staff and we'd need additional equipment to be able to process that. And then the fourth thing would just be purchasing the actual bins for all of our residents to be able to use who are in the program.
And there's one more factor, which would be a space constraint.
Where
Since
to put it.
we only have Fort Totten.
Right.
Yeah.
As Benning Road comes back online as it's rebuilt, then that would be something, then we would have the space to consider it. But right now, with just Fort Totten, we don't have the space.
Benning's not that big either, though.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with Benning though, remember Benning Road wasn't built as a transfer station. It was built as an incinerator.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the footprint that is there, still there, waiting to be demolished, is the incinerators. They're still in place. There's five, Sheila will kill me for not knowing the exact number, but there's 5 or 6 incinerators which are over 30 feet tall. The whole front side of the building was defunct equipment. The tipping floor was on the backside and it was about 30,000 square feet. If you can remove the square footage that was being taken up by the incinerators, we have room to consider other programs.
And we'd have to, look, are we gonna process organics there? Are we gonna take them out? Those are all things we're looking into right now and talking with other jurisdictions about the pros and cons to doing that at your transfer station versus somewhere else.
Do the contracts for organics now include, they have to provide the composting sites where they take
Right,
them?
they
Yeah.
take them to different
Wherever they're-
sites. Yep, in
okay.
Maryland.
Talked about containers. Oh. New ones or addition? Yes. Oh, do you want to tell us about the new containers for the curbside composting program?
They're very cute.
You didn't bring one?
I'm so sorry.
Actually
You said it
surprised.
the other
I
day.
did. I'm
Uh,
surprised you didn't bring it though, because it's like,
Missed opportunity.
your
I'm
pet.
Sorry, I usually haul it around with me, but they essentially look like little toters.
Okay.
Much smaller than your trash toters, but we've purchased about 1,000 of them, so we're not going to be replacing everybody who's in the pilot with a new bin. As we have to replace bins, as new people come on, they will get the new container and we're gonna test how it works. The contractor that we uses those bins for the other work they do and have had good success with them. So I imagine we'll have good success as well and less likely to be stolen, which has been a continuous issue.
yeah,
But they are set to arrive later this month.
great.
Or next month, sorry, March. I forgot it wasn't March already.
Wishful thinking. Of the unfunded provisions of the Zero Waste Omnibus, which do you think should receive highest priority for funding?
That would be the public infrastructure study. Not only the study, but the actual implementation of the plan as well. There's 2 big things. That would be the highest priority for us. And then the second would be grants for, back of house food waste sorting, in commercial entities.
Is that a focus on hospitality or like college
So,
campuses?
yeah,
or-
college campuses, restaurants, hotels.
Okay.
Grocery stores that some of them,
Mhm.
you know, do their
Buffet
cooking
style
on,
cooking.
yeah, on site. So like a Whole Foods or something, right? Who's
Sure.
preparing food on site.
Sure. So only one of our three major stadiums and arenas are compliant with zero waste source separation requirements. Which are out of compliance, and do they have a plan to come into compliance quickly?
So we just found that the one that was in compliance was actually slightly out of compliance now. and
Okay.
So.
So now you don't
across-
have to name any of them.
Great, yep. So, what I will say is we are actively working with all of them and that's a good thing. And so we have not been, ignored. Our outreach has been received well. And so we're in communication with each entity on their plan and their timeline for coming into compliance. So I think we're in a good spot. It would be different if they were pushing back, but that's not been our case.
As I've been talking with them about the bottle bill, one of the things we've talked about is reusables. And, I know IMP, which runs Anthem and 930, is doing reusable drink containers now. And so I've sort of seeded the idea with Nats Stadium and Capital One Arena, because that obviously helps, right? And can save them money, but also creates more green jobs around here, because you'd have to have a washing vendor that's scaling up. But also is something I know we've talked about potentially including washing stations at Benning. So just keeping you in the loop on that,
Yeah, it's
but
something we're looking into.
it's great.
I mean, it still is a small site, so we're just trying to figure out, would we want a washing station there, but it's on the table.
Yeah, for sure. But it'd be great if we could get some of these bigger entities. I think, I was also thinking colleges and, others, cafeterias, places with cafeterias. So probably not the feds at the moment, but maybe someday, because there's a bunch of federal buildings that have full-on cafeterias
Right.
too. So, okay. Do you feel like we have not gone for snow around here yet? All right, I'm gonna think about, this is my snow section. I'm trying to decide how many of these we still need to ask. Just to revisit the bike lanes question.
Mhm.
DPW, I want to talk about protected bike lanes, just to be clear, because I think roadway bike lanes are a little more obvious, I think. DPW sweeps them and DDOT clears them from snow with snow.
Currently, yes.
So two different types of vehicles do that?
Yes.
Okay. And is there hand clearing for either of those?
With some of the smaller reinforced bike lanes, yes, there would have to be hand cleaning because they're too small to get any type of equipment in.
Okay. And that would be the case for snow and for leaf, or I'm sorry, snow and sweeping.
Yes.
Okay. Have you witnessed situations where protected bike lanes are cleared of snow by DDOT and then DPW plows may cover them again?
I haven't personally observed it, but I would, in some areas, that probably could be in the realm of possibility, given the type of it's just a cement block, so the
Yeah.
plow's right next to it.
For sure. For sure, for sure. Okay, is that something we can at least have the plow drivers looking out for?
Yes, I mean, we're constantly improving the quality of our services, so that's something we can incorporate into training.
For sure. Okay, great. could just mean like having to go the wrong way down the road to clear that.
Or adjust the blade, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. How many missed collections were there in the immediate 1 to 2 weeks following the first major snow event? Or you want to talk us through that whole process rather than just giving me a number? You can, either way. There was a lot of effort, so I don't want you to have to not share all that you did.
Well, so, to clarify, given that this was, we haven't had this amount of snow and the frequency of the snow of, in several years. Um, it did create challenges. Under normal circumstances, you might have a slide, scheduled to, and get back on track. But what happened here was the NSSEs we were supporting coupled with the 2 back-to-back storms. But even worse, we had the temperatures overnight that were extremely cold. So lessons learned from the last time we had a significant number of complaints where you and I met in the alley addressing service requests. What we did is we actually procured a number of smaller salt trucks that
Okay.
are specifically signed to the collections division. And this year, what we tried doing is pre-treating those alleyways. There are only those alleyways that are on collection routes with rock salt. Now, the problem is that at a certain depth and at a certain temperature, the snow and the ice will overcome the efficacy of the salt.
Right.
And that's what we experienced here. The other thing that I want to point out is that we tried to proactively address trash because that is the food source for rodents.
Right.
So after the initial storm, there was a period of time where we suspended collecting recycling so that we could make sure that the trash was picked up. We did a pretty good job, I would say, with the trash. There is room, I will fully admit, there is room for improvement on how we handled the recycling, and there probably is room, based on some of my conversations with residents, there is room for improvement on how we communicated that decision and how we communicated how we were addressing the backlog. We will fold those lessons learned from this year into the snow plan moving forward. But unfortunately, it was a perfect combination of events.
Right, including holidays and slides. So there had been other delays in pickups that contributed. Is it true that the lot where the plow and salt trucks are stored were not properly de-iced in time during the first winter storm?
No, we had no issues deploying the trucks. I was personally there. I mean, with that level of snowfall, you're going to have some degree of snow on the ground, but it didn't delay us getting the trucks out at all.
Okay.
Because remember, we deploy before the snow ever starts.
Right.
If there's no precipitation leading into it, we will be putting brine down, and then several hours before the start of snowfall, we are out deploying trucks to lay a layer of salt. So we were already out and about.
Are our salt domes in a good state of repair, or is there deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed?
By and large, the domes are in good condition. I know that there was a complaint that we immediately addressed with one of the smaller domes and with lighting and also with the ventilation fan. And our head of facilities went and made sure that that was addressed. And then with our dome at W Street, we're not sure, we completed an incident report. We're not sure if it was related to delivery of salt or if it was a result of loading the trucks. But one of the frames on one of the entryways was damaged, but we were able to repair that in-house with our fabricators from Fleet.
Okay, great.
And if I could just real quick circle back on the bottle bill, just so
Yes.
the record is clear. The agency we are reviewing it, and we will determine whether or not we fully throw our support behind it once that review is concluded. Just wanted to make sure that the record was clear.
You got it. Do DPW and DGS share the same supply of rock salt?
DGS and DPW? That I don't know. For sidewalks, I would say no, because that's palletized salt. But for things like school parking lots, I would have to get back to you as to whether or not they fill their salt trucks from our domes. We do share with DDOT. So I can't say that we don't, but I would have to confirm for you.
Okay. Talk about facilities, continue talking about facilities for a minute. We heard several public witnesses talk about experiences with the W Street facility, in particular, trash piling up around the entrance and close to Zaire Kelly Memorial Park. Are there staff at DPW responsible for cleaning and maintenance around your own facilities, or is that supposed to be DGS?
So it's twofold answer. In terms of the cleanliness of our lots, yes, that is a DPW function, and we do have the escalation crew handles that and goes from facility to facility. Where applicable, we partner with DOEE, and I can report that we are the best in the district government in terms of keeping our lots clean and avoiding having materials go into the stormwater drains. In fact, our program manager was awarded, I believe, the SWIP Manager of the Year. That might be the wrong term, but he was the best program manager according to DOE. Now, as it relates to the actual facilities themselves, that is because it's within the infrastructure portfolio that falls on DGS. There are some projects that DPW will undertake with our own money, but by and large, the repair falls on DGS. With W Street, I did hear this witness, and I know exactly what they're referring to. There is a spot by our fence line that for some reason, I don't know if it's an unhoused individual or if it's illegal dumping, but there are materials deposited on the corner of our fence line. When we're made aware of it or we see it, the escalation crew comes out and cleans it up. We also send street sweepers to sweep the dead end there in front of the buildings and next to the park in question. I followed up with our grounds maintenance manager, and that park is, I believe, maintained by DGS through contract. We have cut it in the past when service requests have been escalated, but right now it's DGS's responsibility for that particular park.
Looking at your pre-hearing responses, of 141 repairs completed or in progress just at PEMA's 2 facilities, DGS is responsible for all but 4, right? All but 4 of them.
No,
Just 4 of them?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, DGS is responsible for only 4 of them. Is that accurate?
Per our facilities manager, yes. So there are times where we do undertake some projects ourselves just because it's faster
Yeah,
instead of putting it into the portal.
yeah. So
Things
there's
like-
more than that.
Oh, yes, there are issues. I mean, it's an old building. 17, you're referring to 1725.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for instance, like if the plumbing, there was, I think we had we had several plumbing issues where things were being flushed down. The toilets that probably shouldn't have gone in, which resulted in backing up toilets. Instead of waiting to put it in the portal, have DGS assign somebody, we just immediately contracted in order to ensure that the water was up, the facility was cleaned, and the blockage was removed.
Which makes sense, but also costs you money. So do you get reimbursed by DGS when you do that?
No,
Have you ever asked?
I would have to ask our AFO if we have or not.
See, I knew I was gonna end up calling on Perry at some point in this hearing.
I can follow up with them and make sure you
Okay.
get an answer.
If you waited for DGS, say, to come fix the clogged toilets, how long do you think you'd be waiting? What's the SLA?
Yeah, it depends on the project. I actually don't know.
No, so of the 141, are those the 141 that we were looking at in your pre-hearing responses, those were submitted to DGS?
No, not all of them.
No.
Not all of them, okay. Can you differentiate between those that were submitted, but you made the repairs because you were waiting too long versus those that weren't submitted?
We should be able to look at the data and get back to you. Off the
Okay.
top of my head, I don't know right here.
Okay. And is this the case for all your facilities or just that 725?
Most likely all. I mean, some of our buildings are getting up in age, and as they age, some of the problems that manifest, they manifest more frequently.
Your pre-hearing response note that the HVAC capital project is in progress. What does that mean? How long has it been in progress?
Starting
Yeah,
13th.
March 13th, we have already set aside, well, we've scheduled the employees that need to be relocated to facilitate, because this involves lifting units up onto the roof with a crane. So we actually have been working very closely with our sister agencies on this one.
Okay. The project to repair the leaking roof in the Office of Booting and Towing in the handheld room is under review. What does that mean?
It has to, we're looking at the scope of the issue and determining costs to see what's the fastest way of addressing it. In addition, we are working with DGS to figure out how we relocate staff either internally or to another facility so that the space is empty, and that whichever contractor comes in can do the work completely and efficiently.
The handheld room is where the tech for the parking enforcement officers is stored, right?
Correct. It's kind of in the center of the first floor
Yeah, it's that room where they're charging and people
Yes.
go in on the beginning of their shift and they
to
sync
issue
them up.
out the equipment. Yep.
Yep, okay. How long's the roof been leaking?
On and off, several years, I'm sure. We put it in and we've had patch jobs done, some to better success than others.
Thank you. Do you think the public restroom program's been a success at DPW?
I think the data supports that
Mhm.
it's been used, it's been well received by the public, yes.
Yeah, when you look at, well, I'll say we get very few complaints about this program. And you saw on the testimony slide deck, the utilization numbers are quite high. Not the same for every location, of course, but they are utilized frequently.
What's the term of the contract with Throne? Are there year options?
We are issuing a new contract in the near future that's in process, and there will be option years on that.
So it's at OCP?
Yeah, I think we're in the final stages of that contract.
Can other agencies work with DPW to add public restrooms under that
Yes,
contract?
they should be able to do that.
Okay, and what about MOUs with bids and other external organizations?
That I think would be a little bit more complicated
Okay.
than a DGS or, another sister agency. I'm not saying we can't do it, but I would just have to look into that
Yeah.
further.
How many staff at DPW work on the public restroom program?
We don't have any full-time staff that work on this project, so we have a contract administrator that works on other things, and I'm also someone who looks at reporting and data.
Would a full-time program manager make sense if the program continued and expanded?
I think you'd have to increase with many sites, like if you had multiple additional sites, we could look at that. At this point, we don't need a full-time person working on it.
All right, let's move on to parking enforcement. It seems like across the board between FY '22 and now, PEMA citations are down, booting is down, and impoundments are down. So what's going on there?
Well, I mean, we are out there for sure.
Yeah, I know.
When we talked about this internally, one of the things that, this is anecdotal, I don't have any data to provide you, but anecdotally, one of the drivers that we were thinking about as the district builds out more bike lanes, especially reinforced bike lanes,
Mm-hmm,
those spaces are gone.
mm-hmm.
So there's less areas to actually enforce, which would drive down some of the volume that you're seeing. Now, that doesn't account for all of it. But that definitely is something that we looked into as a root cause.
Interesting. Bike lanes, maybe, but also I'm thinking about the flex posts that are at the corners.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that could also be it as well. Because though I think DDOT has moved away from the flexible plastic tabs to a more rigid pole.
Yeah, and even the bump outs,
Yes.
the hardened infrastructure, which is what, everybody prefers because everyone thinks the flexi posts are ugly, but, that's interesting because that sort of like extra space at the end of a corner was often
And if it bumps up to a crosswalk, that's
Yep.
an easy ticket to write. It's
Yep.
blatant, it's in your face.
yep, but now they can't park there, so you don't have to write the ticket.
Correct.
Okay. Are we tracking the scofflaw vehicles that are reclaimed to monitor whether they are continuing to rack up moving violations at the same rate?
I mean, well, the ones we impound, that's the end of the story. Like typically by and large, and I'd have to look at the data again. By and large, the ones that are being reclaimed after they settle their account with DMV and pay up, that I don't know if we're tracking. Now, the ones that we dispose of, that's the end of the story. Typically, those though are the high dollar scofflaws where the amount of fines exceeds the value of the vehicle, and they're just not going to be reclaimed. Those,
Yeah.
no, because we're not tracking anything because we just dispose of them.
We're not, you'd have to track by vehicle, right? Not person. And we're not currently tracking if license plate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was a part of the pilot and got impounded and they picked it up and it was impounded again. We're not currently tracking that.
Okay. At the public witness hearing, we discussed some issues with unclear enforcement of RPP violations versus resident-only parking, as well as misaligned fine amount. When looking at PEMA's citation data, it seems like an awful lot of violations fall under the catch-all of disobeying official sign. Are you at all concerned about the lack of specificity in that citation category?
We talked about this. I believe there was something that needed to be clarified with DDOT, I'm sorry, DMV,
Okay.
thank you. From a data management perspective, yes, it's difficult to parse out the offenses because you're right, it's under a catch-all, but we are confident that the parking enforcement officers are out there writing the tickets. And then once the DMV issue, and I'm blanking on what the exact nature of the issue was, but once that's resolved, then it should fix the issue that was raised.
So it's just a data issue? You think the citations are being issued more specifically than that?
The problem with RPP and resident-only parking is that DMV needs to make corrections to the scale and the table of offenses.
I see.
That is why when a parking officer sees someone parking in resident-only, they'll issue a failure to obey
Okay.
ticket versus a resident-only parking.
So what does the DMV have to do to make that possible?
As I understand it, they've got to create this scale, and it's possibly working through one of their contractors, I'm not certain, but create the scale and adjust the list of penalties. It may be more involved, but that's my understanding.
When can we expect full installation of license plate readers on all PEO vehicles?
I believe that just comes down to, hang on, we still. So it comes down to a procurement issue. Once we have them, we'll install them. That's not the problem. It's just actually the agency receiving them.
Is there anyone who can provide more specifics about what the procurement issue is so we can follow up in our hearing tomorrow?
Yeah, I can get you a POC.
Great. At our hearing in December, we discussed that DPW has the ability to deploy automated parking enforcement. There was a pilot for street sweeping vehicles. Is there interest in implementing automated enforcement again in some capacity?
We talked about this internally, and at this point, no, and it has to do with just the wear and tear on the machines. Given the nature of work that they perform, putting an expensive LPR on it, it runs the risk. And I'm not saying that there's employee negligence or misuse of the equipment, just the nature of the work and the sensitivity of the equipment. That doesn't seem to be like the best platform to put an LPR on at this point.
That's interesting. That makes sense. Okay. What's the annual budget for leasing impound lots?
That I would have to defer to DGS on.
Ah, okay. Do you foresee needing another lot in the near future?
No.
Why did the revenue from auctioned vehicles increase so substantially between FY '23 and '24 from 348,000 to 1.12 million?
We got more efficient and monitored what we were doing down at the Blue Plane lot. I stuck my nose into their business, and based on that, we really just doubled down on our relationship with OCP. And as it relates to scrapping, we had conversations with the vendor to increase the number of times that they were visiting the facility.
Great.
Oh, and correct. Thank you for reminding me. And also, in the past, that with in particular, not with scrapping, but with auctioning, the titling issue, there had been some disagreement between the agencies. We mended the fence and we entered into an MOU with DMV for dedicated titling support, and that reduced a bottleneck that used to exist.
Great. What coordination has there been with DDOT over the last year to improve PEMA operations or DDOT's curbside management program?
We engage with our partners at DDOT on a regular basis and try to provide input on what their engineering department does, recognizing that there are codes on how you use roadway surfaces, but we try to input our specifications of vehicles, how we utilize the space, how parking enforcement needs to go, so that any improvements that are made to the roadways are done with our operations in consideration.
Is PEMA fully able to enforce the digital visitors parking permit program, or does that still require complete adoption of LPRs?
We need the adoption
Yeah, we
of the
would.
LPRs.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. Does the MOU with DEMPED for special events apply to the procedures and use of DPW vehicles for road closures?
I know traditionally it did, especially if the event went through the mayor's special events task group. There is a published list of costs for personnel and equipment for every agency that might need to support one of those events, and it's part of the permitting process.
Through MPD, right? MPD.
Well, it's anybody's cost, but it's through HCMA houses the mayor's special events task group. And every agency that supports those events and is involved in conditional permitting has a seat at the table. And the list is given to the event organizers.
When is something classified as a nightlife event?
That if it's related specifically to the nightlife enforcement program.
I believe they're
Oh.
also in designated areas
Areas,
that are pre-selected, so, the U Street corridor, Connecticut Avenue, I missed.
H Street.
So it wouldn't just be anywhere.
And
right?
it's 9 PM to 4 AM during nightlife hours in those zones.
There were more than 8,000 work hours spent on nightlife enforcement in FY '24, resulting in $381,000 in overtime spending. Were all of those work hours considered overtime?
Yes,
Was this work that was not happening prior to the creation of the nightlife task force?
that's correct.
Why is the nightlife task force still considered an overtime event and not regular part of the agency operations?
Because it's outside the regular working hours of those employees that are supporting the initiative.
Got it. And there's not an opportunity to make that a particular shift?
It's because it's only on Fridays and Saturdays between 9 and 4, so it's really hard to fold that into the district-wide operations that we're conducting.
Got it. Hours tracked and tagged as Capital One event work went from 91 hours in FY '24 to 560 hours in FY '25 so far. Does that constitute overtime spending?
It does. That staffing is specific to each event around the arena when it happens.
What's the total budget for that amount of PEMA staff time?
We don't allocate a specific budget to it, but it's coming out of operating funds.
Do you know how much you're spending on that so far?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get the number from Perry and forward it over.
Okay,
You want just for Capital One Arena?
yeah. For FY '24 and '25 year to date, please. All right, we are getting close. Yes, we have just a couple more categories here. All right, so this, just getting into some interagency coordination and other miscellaneous questions. When was the last time the park litter can data set was updated?
October, so very recently. And we worked very closely with DGS. So that public litter can website that we created now has DPW cans and DGS service cans. And we actually went out and surveyed each can to make sure that it was still there. So it was quite an undertaking. But we feel confident in that data at this point, because we've physically laid eyes on, we or DGS has physically laid eyes on those cans.
Okay, now, sounds great. Did DPR provide the list
No, DGS provided the list,
of all the sites?
right?
Is that list now available to the committee? So I could spot check it?
Yeah, so, and it'll be on the website too, so you will be able, I don't know if it's a list format, but I
Okay,
could probably
a
get it
map.
to you in
No, a
list
map is
format.
fine.
But yes, you'd be able to see the cans and parks, for example.
Okay,
On the map now, because that was what we needed DGS to partner with us to do. They do recycling in some of the parks, so we partnered with them on that endeavor.
so if it was updated in October, that didn't necessarily mean there was a magical flood of resources to start collecting in places that had not been on the list. So how are you managing those collections?
We were already servicing many parks.
Parks.
And DGS was already servicing some parks as well. I think what the gap was our understanding on the administrative side where every can was. You know, someone on the back of a collection truck probably understood where the can was, but
Mhm.
I didn't necessarily have an administrative view where each can was placed. So that's what we kind of shored up, is our record keeping of those cans.
And how often is DPW servicing litter cans in parks?
We have crews out daily.
Yeah.
I can get you the schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to be emptied daily?
Well, I mean, it's similar to the residential trash collection. It's on a cycle.
Right.
So they're on one route one day, then they move to the next set of route, the next route, then following day. And then in certain areas, again, I'd have to check, but in certain areas, if it's a high volume area, there may be a route that's duplicative, kind of like the same with trash and recycling at residential residences that we service.
Okay, can I flag for you right now Hobart Twins Park, which is two pocket parks in the middle of Hobart and Pleasant Plains?
I
And
think
then- Yeah,
what you may be getting at, and we agree, is that kind of the next step is, after we've inventoried the cans and have a good understanding of where our cans are, is now having a good understanding of our staff and the servicing of those cans, which is what the team is working on now,
Okay.
to better understand, like, how many times is this particular can being serviced? And so that's phase 2. which is
Sure.
what we're currently
Okay.
undertaking.
yeah, because I think where we are at with that park right now is that my staff just calls it in once a week to 311 for collection.
Okay.
Not a,
Right, not cool, but like, that's what we're doing for now. But I'm glad to hear there was that update in October that can help us get through it. Having sort of been part of some correspondence about this all last summer, I just don't have a lot of confidence that you might have received all the data you should have. So that's part of my skepticism. It's not your ability to execute on it, but the knowledge base. So I'd love to see it, the map. And then let's see. What's the grounds maintenance application data set? What does that show?
So the grounds maintenance application data set is data about our mowing operations. The site information is updated every year, but it's only for DPW maintained sites.
Oh.
We're working on a combined mowing application this year will be put together by Octo, and it will include both the DPW and DGS sites. And it will include the date last mowed and the next scheduled mowing date, because I know that was of particular interest to residents.
What sites are you responsible for mowing? Or what types of sites?
yeah, we're this side of the highway.
Side of that, yeah.
Or roads, doesn't have to be a highway.
Most of the
side
islands,
road.
with the exception of
Yeah.
medians, with the exception, I think, of 16th Street, which is DDOT, Triangle Parks, Orphaned Parks. I mean, the list is pretty extensive.
Orphaned parks is a good phrase.
Yeah.
Um,
You said that.
why do you do it instead of DGS doing all of it? Those all sound like public facilities.
Well, no, most of these, it's public space. So these usually almost all of them abut a roadway. So
Okay.
it's something that does fall in our bailiwick.
Got it. Okay.
And circling back to Hobart Twin Park.
Yes.
It's being reported to me that is a DGS DPR maintained site, but we will close the loop.
Yeah.
Oh, so thank you, but also wasn't the whole point that you guys collect trash at parks and that's why we were
We
updating
do
it?
some parks. The whole point of the inventory was just to get a better sense of where each litter can was physically located, but it didn't mean that DPW took over servicing of every single park.
Got it.
And there's been no change in that. So we do some.
We
But-
do the trash, whereas DGS contracts out the recycling.
Right, that part I knew. There's no recycling at Hobart Twins anyway, but
We'll close the loop for you.
That'd be great. We're gonna have to keep working on that. Okay. I don't think we can solve it today. Does the public litter can data, that's gonna be available to the public?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
that's up on the
will it
website.
say who's responsible for each one on the map?
I do not know if it says that or not. I have to check.
Okay. Any chance that like the mowing can someday report when cans were emptied last? With
It
better
is
tech,
Brendan
perhaps?
Ford's greatest love in life
Yes.
is public litter cans and transparency in the public litter can process. So I'm confident that that is where he wants to take it. And I might already distinguish between who manages the can. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Right, I can't remember. It could be color coded, like
Yeah.
the breadcrumb trail is blue for one agency, green for the other. I don't know,
Yeah.
but we can look into that.
All right, let me know when I can play around with it. All right.
Okay.
We'll also want to talk about the How Am I Driving program. ORM shared data on FY 24 and 25 cases, and DPW received more than 140 complaints and responded to only a few of them. ORM has even updated the process to automatically send complaints and periodic follow-ups, but DPW is still not responding. Can you walk me through how you will address that concern?
So we are responsive when we receive the requests. I've had many conversations with ORM. They voiced the same concerns that you have just talked about. And it is a work in progress. I will say that we are a large agency. When we get the information, we do forward it on to the each of the administrations. The issue is at that point, identifying the employee that was operating the vehicle in question.
Okay,
And that takes a little bit of time. However, when I am receiving particular instances of egregious behavior, I am forwarding it directly to the administrators with the expectation that an investigation and administrative action will follow.
okay. Last topic is staffing. Just 2 questions to do. Wait, we got to it. Okay. Okay. 2 questions. Absence rates for SWARMA and PIMA seem especially high, 35% and 19.5% respectively. What portion of those absences are unscheduled or unexcused?
So on this point, just to clarify, the absentee rates that reported were weekly, not daily.
Okay.
And the absenteeism rate for SWAMA is 17.4%, and the breakdown of that was 12.2% is scheduled leave, with 3.4% is unscheduled. The only unexcused leave is AWOL. Any other type of leave has to be approved, and the AWOL rate is about 1.8%. I have had conversations with Mr. Pringle about making sure that if it's not a protected class of leave, that his managers are monitoring leave use so that there's sufficient coverage. And then in the event of AWOLs, we work with HR and legal, and if we hit the requisite threshold, we delve into a personnel matter. The absenteeism rate for PIMA is 19.5%. Of that, 59% is scheduled and 41% is unscheduled. Again, the only unexcused leave is AWOL, and that rate is 7%.
There was a reporting error in the SWAMA number.
Right.
From not 35, but 17.4.
Yes, correct.
Got it. And what's the status of hiring for the SWARMA administrator position?
I actually just asked for an update. I believe the vacancy has closed. I know the last time I checked, which was when the vacancy was still open, we had in excess of 40 applicants. So I am hoping that I have a very large and robust pool to screen and then schedule interviews.
What are you looking for in this position?
A well-rounded manager who has significant experience in large-scale trash and recycling operations. Ideally, it would be somebody who is used to thinking proactively as opposed to reactively. and works well, relates well to the staff. That's very important to me, is making sure that all of the staff members felt like they are heard and that they are taken care of as well as being productive.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes today's performance oversight hearing. The Committee on Public Works and Operations will be holding one more hearing tomorrow at 9:30 on the Department of For Hire Vehicles and the Office of Contracting and Procurement. Please visit the council's hearing management system to view the council's upcoming hearings, where you can also register to testify, view agency materials, and submit your own written testimony for the record. The time is 1:26 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.